Hey guys, tonight we're going deep behind the velvet, the marble, the candelabras, and the heavy perfume of royal palaces to explore a world most history books barely dare to mention. And let's be real, you probably won't survive this. Not because it's scary in a ghosts and goblins kind of way, but because if you were a girl in a royal palace back then, the combination of corsets, court politics, and constant surveillance would crush your will to live in under a week. But you're here now, and it's a safe place to be curious. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is right now. I want to know if you're falling asleep in Sydney or wide awake in Detroit. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You arrive in Versailles, not the one on tourist maps, but the one under the skin of the palace. The real one, the version most people never see. It's sometime in the late 17th century, and everything smells like beeswax, old lace, and the sweat of secrets. You're standing in the Hall of Mirrors, but it's empty, quiet. No courtiers, just your own reflection multiplied 100 times, watching you back with a knowing look. The thing about Versailles is that it pretends to be all about rules and ceremony and power, but it's really a machine built to control desire. You learn this fast. Every hallway leads to a set of closed doors, and every closed door leads to whispers. You press your ear to one, a soft moan, the rustle of skirts, laughter not meant to be heard, then silence. You pass girls in powdered wigs and pink satin gliding like ghosts down corridors, avoiding eye contact but exchanging glances that say everything. One of them is maybe 15, maybe 16. Her waist is cinched so tight she looks like she might snap. She smiles for a second, but only with her eyes. She's not allowed to speak to you. Not unless you're a noble. You're not yet. A lady-in-waiting tells you not to linger. His Majesty is feeling watchful today, she says, without explaining who His Majesty is. You're not sure if she means the king, or someone worse. The court runs on fear and favour, and rumour, always rumour. You finally get pulled into the chambers of a woman named Anne-Marie. She's older than the others, 23, which in palace years might as well be 50. She motions you inside. Her chamber is small and warm, too warm. Heavy drapes block the moonlight, and the fire burns even though it's spring. She offers you something sweet in a crystal goblet and tells you to sit by the mirror. That's where they always start, she says. You ask who she means. The men. The ones who come to pick. The ones who decide which of us is fresh enough to parade at the next masque. They like to watch first, from behind the glass. Makes them feel like gods. There are rumours, she says, about mirrors that aren't mirrors, beds that fold into walls, and eyes behind every portrait. There's even talk of a secret society made up entirely of former royal lovers, each one branded in a place no one would dare inspect. She laughs when she says it, but the laugh is hollow. You don't ask how she knows. You already know she knows. That night, you follow her to the Queen's wing, where a group of girls is practicing how to bow. Not just any bow, the heart tilt, which is all about suggesting without offering. You're told that everything in court is code. The way you lace your sleeves, how you look at someone from across a ballroom, whether you drop your fan, none of it is random. It's all choreography. It's all watched. You get the first real shock when you realise how young some of the girls are. 11, 12. Old enough to bleed, and therefore old enough to marry or at least be positioned. One girl, Claire, is being trained to serve as a companion to a visiting duke. He's 62, she's 13. It's fine, they say, because she's not technically being touched. Just observed, just practised on, just broken in. You try not to vomit. The historical fact, in many European royal courts, especially France and Spain, noble girls as young as 12 were expected to serve as ladies-in-waiting, often exposed to adult political and sexual dynamics long before puberty. Their marriages were arranged even earlier, sometimes while still in the cradle. The fringe fact. Some palaces, like the Alcazar in Spain, were rumoured to have entire wings built specifically for the discreet movement of royal mistresses, girls smuggled in for nighttime visits and never seen during daylight hours. No one officially confirmed it, but a few architectural anomalies seem to support the claims. As for scholarly debate, there's long been argument over just how aware these girls were of the roles they were being pushed into. Some historians argue they were fully complicit, even ambitious. Others say that's a modern projection, and most were simply surviving in systems designed to consume them. You end your night back in Anne-Marie's room. She's brushing her hair with slow, practiced strokes, even though she's already undressed for bed. You ask her why. Because you never know who's watching, she says without turning, and if they're watching, they better want what they see. Then she looks at you through the mirror. Not at you, through you. Don't fall for the dresses and diamonds, she says. This place isn't made of gold, it's made of appetites, and girls like us, we're just the seasoning. You lie down in the small guest cot near her fire. The mattress is thin, the ceiling creaks above you. Somewhere, far down the hallway, someone is crying behind a closed door, and in the distance, faintly, you hear music begin to play. Slow, deliberate, the sound of a harpsichord winding up for another night of performance. Morning in the palace doesn't feel like morning anywhere else. It slips in reluctantly, like it knows it isn't really welcome. There's no sunrise in the usual sense. Just a slow shifting of light filtered through heavy brocade curtains and flickering candle stubs. You wake before the bells, the air still heavy from last night's perfume and secrets. Anne-Marie is gone. Not gone in a sinister way, just elsewhere. The chamber is silent except for the faint rustle of skirts in the hallway. You don't need to dress yourself, someone's already coming to do it for you. A girl your age, maybe younger, appears with a gown over one arm and a carved wooden box in the other. Her name is Eloise. She doesn't make eye contact. Her job isn't to speak. Her job is to know exactly how to fasten your stays, tie your petticoats, and make you presentable by someone else's standard. As her fingers move, you realise how often they do this. Not just with you, with anyone above her station. She's one of dozens, maybe hundreds, who orbit the royal women like satellites, never getting too close, never being noticed unless they fail. And right now, you're not a person. You're a piece of furniture that has to be polished and positioned. Once you're dressed, you're summoned. Not asked, summoned. To the nursery wing. It's not for children, ironically. That's just the nickname. It's where young girls of noble blood are kept before they're married off or appointed to some position near the Queen. It's quiet when you walk in. Too quiet. You expect giggling chatter, but no. Everyone here has been trained into stillness. They sit straight, legs crossed at the ankles, eyes downward unless addressed. There are 9 of them today. Ages range from maybe 8 to 16. You spot Claire from last night. Her hair's been curled into ringlets, her eyes rimmed with something shimmering. She looks like a doll. She also looks not quite here. You're shown to your place at a long table where breakfast is being served. But don't get excited. Breakfast at court isn't food, it's a formality. Cold fruit, 2 stiff pastries, and watery chocolate in porcelain cups. You're not here to eat. You're here to be seen not eating. Girls who finish everything on their plate tend to be whispered about. A governess arrives, Madame Bellamy. Tall, severe, wearing a dress that rustles like dry leaves when she walks. She eyes each girl like she's inspecting a tapestry for flaws. You realise quickly, she doesn't care who you are. She cares who you might be, and that's worse. She starts the morning lesson by asking Claire to stand and recite the 7 virtues of a court girl. Claire's voice is thin but clear. Modesty, patience, obedience, discretion, grace, fertility, silence. You blink at the last 2. Fertility? Silence? Is that really a virtue? Apparently yes. You're asked to stand next. Madame Bellamy watches your posture, your tone, the way you hold your hands. You're being evaluated like livestock and you know it. The room, warm and sweet-smelling, suddenly feels like a gilded cage. You're starting to see how this works. You're not being prepared for freedom. You're being prepped for display. Later you meet Camille. She's 17, already married, technically a duchess, but she's still stuck here. Why? Because the man she was wed to hasn't sent for her. He preferred her younger sister. Camille shrugs when she says it, as if it's just how things go. He said I was too tall, she adds, smirking. Imagine being too tall for your own husband. She's not bitter. She's something stranger, resigned. Like she's read the final page of her own story and accepted it. You walk with her down the sunlit hallway, her heels echoing off the stone. She tells you that when she was 13 she was told her hair would decide her future. Too dark, less desirable, too light, seen as foolish. She was sent to a woman who applied lemon juice and set her outside like laundry to bleach. This is the part of the palace no one writes about, where girls are measured in inches, pounds, pigments and bloodlines. You're starting to understand why mirrors are everywhere. It's not vanity, it's surveillance. Historical fact. In many royal courts, especially in France and Austria, young noblewomen were assigned formal handlers from the moment they entered palace life. Their diets, clothing, even their menstrual cycles were monitored and documented in official court ledgers. Virginity wasn't assumed, it was audited. Fringe fact. Some families were known to pre-train their daughters in the art of court allure by hiring male actors to play visiting noblemen. These rehearsals could last for months and were often more explicit than anything the girls experienced later. It was called preparation, but that word feels like a lie when you see it up close. The debate among historians is murkier. Were these girls truly passive pawns? Or did some find ways to manipulate the system for their own gain? There are accounts of ambitious young women who played the long game, using court gossip, forged friendships, even faked illnesses to avoid bad matches or trap more powerful suitors. Some won, most didn't. After the lessons, you follow Camille through a series of winding halls. She's taking you somewhere not on the official maps. You pass behind a tapestry, duck through a door half your height, and emerge in a forgotten corridor. At the end, a small room with lace-covered windows and a chaise that's been kissed to death by sunlight. "This is where we go when we want to vanish," Camille says. "No one listens here. No one cares." There are etchings on the wall, names, hearts, dates, some as old as 100 years. The dust tastes sweet in your mouth. You sit beside her. She offers you a sugar plum and tells you how she once fell in love with a page boy. He had no title, no land, just a face I couldn't stop drawing in my notebook. You ask what happened, she smiles. He's now married to a merchant's daughter in Bordeaux, and I am still here, practicing my bow. You look out the window where the garden gleams in precise symmetrical rows. A place of perfect order. A place where nothing wild grows unless it's allowed to. Camille leans her head back and sighs. Sometimes I think about walking barefoot through the rose thorns, just to feel something that isn't velvet. By now you're starting to understand. Nothing inside a royal palace happens by accident. Every glance, every sigh, every misplaced handkerchief is deliberate, or dangerous, or both. The walls themselves seem to breathe with knowing. They've watched generations of girls become women, then whispers, then footnotes, and today you're shadowing the ones who do the watching. The ladies in waiting, they look like they belong. Draped in pale blues and silvers, always hovering a respectful pace behind the royals, they seem born of the palace walls. But once you step into their quarters, away from the polished surfaces and into the cracked plaster utility wings, you start to see the seams. The air smells like starch and burnt lavender. There are chipped teacups on the windowsill. One girl is darning another's stocking with her teeth clenched around the needle. This is where the real stories live. You're introduced to Sabine. She's 19 and has been here since she was 11. Her job is to assist the Comtesse de Vigny, a woman known more for her influence than her beauty. Sabine makes the Comtesse's tea, fastens her gowns, and most importantly keeps her secrets. And that's the real job of a lady-in-waiting, to absorb power without being seen, to memorize every detail and share none of it. But of course they do share it, just not with the people you'd expect. Each night after the gowns come off and the laces are unpicked, the ladies-in-waiting gather in a dim, warm side room nicknamed the birdcage. There's wine, crusts of bread, a few soft chairs, and an understanding that nothing said in the birdcage will ever be repeated elsewhere. Unless, of course, someone's reputation needs adjusting. Tonight, you're invited to sit in. Sabine pulls you in beside her, and within minutes the room crackles with stories. One girl tells of a duchess who fakes fainting spells to avoid sleeping with her husband. Another recounts how a queen once summoned her to light candles, not because she needed light, but because her secret lover was already in the room and she needed an excuse to pretend surprise. You sip warm, spiced wine and listen, and it hits you. These women know everything. Who's bedding whom? Who's pretending? Who's pregnant and pretending not to be? And even more chilling, who's being watched? The conversation turns to Gabrielle, a delicate doe-eyed girl who arrived 6 months ago and is now always posted near the Dauphin. Sabine says she's never seen someone climb the ranks so fast. She's not clever exactly, she whispers, but she knows how to listen. And sometimes that's more dangerous. You ask what that means? Sabine grins. It means she's going to end up very rich, or very dead. You leave the birdcage that night with your ears buzzing. Everyone smiles on their way back to chambers. Everyone keeps their heads bowed when passing guards. But behind the eyes, sharpness, calculations. The historical fact here: ladies-in-waiting were far more than glorified servants. In places like Versailles and Vienna, they acted as informal diplomats, spies, and even matchmakers. They had access to the most private moments of queens and princesses, and could make or break a courtier's fortune with a single comment whispered to the right ear. The fringe fact. There were rumours that some kings, especially those known for paranoia, planted double agents among their wives' attendants. Women trained not in etiquette, but in surveillance. They'd report back everything: late-night visitors, questionable bruises, forbidden letters tucked into shoes. One particular French king was said to have employed 3 sisters under different names in different palaces. The scholarly debate. Historians remain divided on whether ladies-in-waiting had any real agency, or if their power was just an illusion, proximity mistaken for influence. Some argue they were pawns. Others insist they were the quiet architects behind some of history's boldest scandals. The next day you trail Sabine through the Queen's wing. It's a show morning, meaning the Queen will be dressed in front of a small audience of nobles and diplomats. It's called the lever, and it's as much theatre as routine. The Queen, pale and stiff in her corset, sits at the centre, while her attendants glide around her like petals around a stem. Sabine is responsible for powdering the Queen's décolletage today, a task that seems small, but is actually filled with implications. The closer you're allowed to the Queen's skin, the closer you are to her trust. It's a privilege, and everyone in the room knows it. As Sabine brushes the powder on with trembling fingers, the Queen says, "A softer touch, please. I'm not stone yet." A few nobles chuckle. Sabine doesn't smile. Later she'll replay that moment 100 times in her head, trying to figure out whether it was a warning or a joke. After the lever, the Queen dismisses the audience but asks Sabine to stay. You watch from the edge of the doorway, heart thudding. The Queen tells Sabine to bring her a letter from the drawer beside the window. Sabine hesitates for half a second too long, just enough time to be noticed. The letter, when retrieved, is sealed with black wax, a colour typically reserved for mourning or covert affairs. The Queen slips it into her bodice without a word. When they leave the room, Sabine grabs your wrist. Her grip is ice. "That was the letter," she says. You ask, "The letter?" She nods. "The one they tortured that maid for last winter. The one they said didn't exist." You don't sleep much that night. In the morning, one of the girls from the birdcage is gone. No explanation. Her room stripped clean. Her name never spoken again. The palace doesn't always punish with noise. Sometimes it punishes by erasing. That day, the younger girls practice their embroidery with extra focus. No one asks where the missing girl went. They all know better. They just stitch roses and doves and scenes of tranquil forests, pretending they don't feel the chill creeping up their spines. You and Sabine pass in the hallway. She doesn't speak, but her hand brushes yours, deliberately, just once, and you feel something pressed into your palm. It's a note. No words, just a sketch. A woman, blindfolded, holding a key. You keep the note tucked inside your sleeve for hours before you dare to look at it again. The drawing of the blindfolded woman holding a key. It's not decorative. It's a message. But from whom? Sabine gave it to you, but she didn't draw it. You can tell by the lines. They're faint, frantic, done by someone used to hiding what they make. There's no signature, just that symbol. And you're starting to realize that symbols mean everything in this place. More than names, more than truth. The next day, you're told to assist with preparations for a marriage. Not yours, thankfully, but one arranged between a dull-eyed princess from a damp German duchy and a sweating, ambitious nobleman who's just bought his way into court. The girl is 17, but she moves like someone half that age. She twitches when touched, doesn't speak unless spoken to. You learn her name is Adelheid, and this is her first time in Versailles. She hasn't seen sunlight in 3 days. Her new husband is 36, and already has 4 children with his first wife, who conveniently died of a chest affliction last year. The wedding will be performed in 2 days. But before that can happen, there's something more urgent: the inspection. You hear it whispered at first. Has she been seen yet? Is it scheduled? Has the physician arrived? You assume someone's sick. But no, the physician isn't here to treat illness. He's here to examine Adelheid's body, for purity. You don't get told the details, but you catch enough from Sabine and the other attendants. A doctor, a midwife, and 2 noblewomen of unimpeachable virtue will gather behind closed doors with the girl. They will verify, visually and physically, that she is untouched. A maiden in the legal bodily sense. It must be documented before the marriage can proceed. Not for religious reasons, for political insurance. If the marriage fails to produce heirs, the groom can't be blamed. Adelheid doesn't cry. You notice that. She's motionless as she's led away in her thin chemise, her face like marble. A statue being moved. And when she returns hours later, she's still silent. But now something is missing from her eyes. Whatever was left of her has been scraped out. Later that night, you overhear the women in the birdcage talking about the inspection like it's a ritual. One of them claims she heard about a girl who used leeches to simulate bleeding on the wedding night because she'd already given herself to a stable boy. Another swears there's a powder, illegal, of course, that can swell the right parts just enough to fool even the most invasive fingers. It's the kind of talk that makes you want to stop listening, but you can't. The historical fact. Virginity inspections were unfortunately very real. In both Eastern and Western courts, the bodies of young noblewomen were treated like property to be verified. There were even official seals used to certify the findings, recorded in royal archives and witnessed by multiple parties. This wasn't privacy, it was procedure. The fringe fact? Some brides reportedly underwent minor surgeries, yes, actual surgeries, to restore what nature or history had removed. The procedures were crude, painful, and often more symbolic than effective, but in desperate cases symbolism was enough to save a girl's life, or at least her marriage. The scholarly debate centres around how much these girls truly understood before the moment of inspection. Some historians claim they were fully briefed, even rehearsed. Others insist they were ambushed, dragged from their beds and laid bare under cold candlelight. Both versions are haunting. Both are likely true, depending on who you were and how much your bloodline was worth. That night you walk with Sabine in the garden. It's late and the guards barely glance your way. You ask her why no one speaks of what happened with Adelheid. Sabine stops near a marble fountain, her face soft in the moonlight. Because everyone's either done it or knows they will. You sit together watching the water trickle from the mouth of a stone nymph. Somewhere above you, laughter echoes from the balcony. Courtiers drinking, dancing, pretending none of this exists. Sabine pulls something from her sleeve. Another note. This one's written in delicate script. She knows what's behind the 3rd panel in the Hall of Queens. You don't know what that means. Not yet. The next morning, Adelheid is married. The ceremony is glittering, formal and nauseating. She barely moves during her vows. Her groom is visibly drunk by midday. At the celebratory dinner, the Queen toasts the happy couple while servants pour wine that smells like honey and rot. Then comes the bedding ceremony. Yes, that's real. The bride is escorted to the marriage bed in full view of the court, while the groom strips down to his underclothes and follows her in. Curtains are drawn. Guests pretend to avert their eyes, but everyone listens. What are they hoping to hear? Movement, crying, nothing. It doesn't matter. A maid emerges moments later with blood on the sheets. Real or staged, no one asks. The point is not whether it happened. The point is that everyone believes it happened. Sabine finds you later, hiding in the corridor. Her hands are shaking. They're going to lock her in the West Wing, she says, until they confirm pregnancy. You stare at her. She nods. He paid for her. Now he wants proof it worked. There are no words for the way that feels, like watching someone disappear while still standing in the room with you. Sabine starts to say something else, but stops. Behind her, 2 royal guards walk past slowly. One of them is staring at her in that way. That court way. The kind that isn't flirtation. It's inventory. Sabine walks away without another word. That night, you finally sneak into the Hall of Queens. It's silent, lit only by the blue wash of moonlight through stained glass. You count the panels on the wall, each painted with the face of a past royal woman. All of them smiling. All of them dead. The 3rd panel is different. You press against the corner. Nothing. Then you run your fingers along the seam. There. A latch, almost invisible. It opens. Inside, just barely illuminated, a small space, a bench, and a velvet box. You reach for it. Inside is a diary, written in a child's hand. The first page reads, "I am not supposed to write, but they said I am a gift, and gifts should not bleed." You sit cross-legged in that narrow secret chamber behind the panel in the Hall of Queens, heart thumping quietly against the velvet box in your lap. The diary is no thicker than your hand and bound in wine-coloured leather that smells faintly of beeswax and lilac. Whoever hid it didn't want it found, but also didn't want it destroyed, which in this place counts as an act of rebellion. The handwriting inside is tight and round, the kind taught in finishing schools. You guess the girl who wrote it was no older than 12 when she began. Her name never appears, not once, but her voice is clear enough. You read the next few entries in a whisper, barely breathing. "Today they said I would serve the Queen. That is an honour." I smiled, but my stomach hurt. "He looked at me during supper, the one they said I must not speak of. I kept my eyes on the bread. The Queen's perfume made me sneeze. She said I was delicate. That's good, I think." There's a rhythm to it. Innocence rubbing up against menace like silk on a blade. You're not sure how many years pass within these pages, but her tone grows heavier, sharper. Her questions stop being rhetorical. Why do the ladies whisper when the men leave? Why do the girls disappear after the solstice balls? Why is the door to the Red Room always locked except when it isn't? By the time you close the diary, you feel like you know her. Or maybe you've met dozens like her already, their voices still caught in the walls. You leave the panel quietly, pressing it shut behind you. The air outside smells the same, but feels different. Like now you're walking through layers of invisible thread, spun by girls who learned too late how tightly it could strangle. That afternoon you accompany a small group of girls to the tailoring wing. Most don't realise how many floors the palace has until they're told to descend to this one. The corridor is damp and smells like chalk and rotting silk. Dresses hang from ceiling hooks, suspended like ghosts. Bolts of fabric lean against the walls like weary soldiers. You're here for a fitting, not your own, but Gabrielle's. The quiet one with the soft steps and the terrifying rise in court favour. She's being outfitted for something called the Midnight Mask, and the dress she's being stitched into is nothing short of a declaration. Deep plum, with a bodice sharp enough to cut someone's gaze and gold embroidery that winds across her ribs like a serpent. She looks lethal. She knows it. The seamstress barely looks up as she works. You ask how long she's been here. "Since before the last king lost his mistress to the ice," she says, then goes back to hemming. You're not sure what that means, but you write it down in your mind anyway. Everything here is either a metaphor or a warning. Gabrielle steps off the platform, turns to you and smiles, but not with joy. It's more of an invitation, or a test. "They say the mask is for pleasure," she murmurs, "but the pleasure isn't ours." You follow her to the main hall where preparations are already underway. Chandeliers are being lowered for candle replacement. Musicians rehearse in a sun-drenched corner. The air vibrates with anticipation and powder, and then you see it. The guest list, or rather, a portion of it, clutched in the hand of a sweating, over-decorated scribe. You catch enough names to know this isn't an ordinary party. Several foreign diplomats, a Venetian merchant family, a prince from Sweden, and then, toward the bottom, marked with a small symbol, likely unnoticed by anyone who didn't know where to look, Mademoiselle C, escorted. Sabine stands beside you now, reading over your shoulder. "Escorted means chosen," she says. "She won't be dancing." You ask who Miss C is. "Claire," she whispers. "The youngest." The youngest. Claire. The girl with the hollow stare, the perfect posture. The one who was practicing her bow not a week ago. Sabine grabs your sleeve and pulls you into a side corridor far from the bustle. They're prepping her for the Red Room. You freeze. That name again. The Red Room. It's always whispered, never explained. But now you see it for what it is. A destination. A threshold. Maybe not a room at all, but a state of being. You press Sabine. "What happens in the Red Room?" She sighs. "It depends on who you ask. Some say it's a theatre. Others say it's where the king watches girls undress while masked guests place bets. There's talk of something called the mirror chair. A device. Or an illusion. Or a trap. Your stomach turns. You leave her standing there and go back to the tailoring wing, desperate to find Claire. But she's gone. In her place, a folded scrap of ribbon rests on the velvet cushion. You pick it up and find something embroidered on the edge, stitched with delicate, shaking hands. "I want to remember what I looked like before." That night, the palace transforms. The masque begins at midnight. Guests arrive into elaborate costumes, each mask more absurd than the last. Plumed birds, silver foxes, even a woman with a porcelain veil shaped like a wolf's grin. The air smells like myrrh and roses crushed underfoot. Music winds through the halls like a spell with no end. You aren't invited, of course, but Sabine is, and she smuggles you in. You wear a borrowed gown, deep blue with sleeves that hang like moonlight. Your mask is simple, white lace shaped into a butterfly, delicate and easily overlooked. That's the plan. Inside, everything is heat and shadow and sugar. The ballroom shimmers with candlelight bouncing off mirrored walls, making the space look endless. You cling to the edge, scanning the crowd for Claire. You don't see her. You do, however, see Gabrielle, dancing with the Venetian ambassador. She's laughing, but her hand is clenched into a fist behind her back. Then the music stops. A bell rings once, twice, 3 times, and the dancers part. From the far side of the room, a procession enters. A group of masked nobles, faces completely hidden behind black silk, surround a figure in red. Blood red. It's Claire, or what's left of her. Her body is upright, but her eyes are gone. Blank. Absent. As if someone turned her soul off like a candle. Her lips are painted too red. Her gown clings in a way that makes her seem older, less real. Like a statue designed to provoke. She walks like she's been taught, but her steps don't land. Sabine squeezes your hand so hard you feel her nails. The girl who was a child yesterday is now an exhibit, and the Red Room is no longer just a rumour. It's the next door on the left. You don't follow Claire into the Red Room, not right away. Your feet won't move. Your heart feels like it's been wrapped in silk and yanked tight. Around you, the masquerade resumes, music and laughter rising again like nothing happened. Like Claire didn't just get paraded past the crowd with the posture of a marionette and the eyes of someone who's wandered far from her own body. Sabine doesn't speak, but she tugs your arm, steering you away from the ballroom. "They'll clear the floor soon," she whispers. "Only the chosen remain after the 3rd bell." You realise she's right. Guests are beginning to vanish behind curtains, into passageways, into roles they've prepared for all day. The palace doesn't stop at midnight. It opens. She pulls you down a hallway you haven't seen before, narrower and colder. The music behind you grows muffled. You pass oil paintings of saints and sinners, each staring down with equal judgment. Sabine pauses at a tall arched door with a lion's head carved into the wood. "This isn't the Red Room," she says, "but it's close." She knocks once, then twice, then a long pause before the 3rd. The door opens inward with a groan. Inside is not what you expected. No velvet, no candles, no decadence. Just a stone room with bare walls and a woman seated at a table, illuminated by a single lamp. She looks up. Her face is sharp, older than most you've seen in the palace, but not unkind. Her hair is bound in a grey ribbon, her dress dark and simple. She doesn't ask who you are. "You found the diary?" she asks Sabine. Sabine nods. "And she read it?" This time it's you who nods. The woman leans back. "Then she can stay." Her name is Aurore. She used to be a governess, she says, back when the king was still young and the queen still hopeful. But she saw too much. Said too much. Now she watches from the edges, collecting the names and stories of girls the palace swallows. She opens a drawer and lays out a bundle of letters. All from girls who vanished after being chosen, she says. Not all for the Red Room. Some were sent abroad. Others to convents that were more like prisons. A few... well, no one ever heard from them again. You pick up one of the letters. The handwriting is messy, rushed. They told me I was honoured, that I would lie beside a man whose face I would not see, that I was silk and scent and duty. But I still bled. I still hurt. You stare at the words until the ink swims. Aurore stands and gestures to the back of the room, where a faded tapestry covers what looks like a sealed-off archway. She pulls it aside. A smaller door hides behind it, built into the stone with no handle, just a keyhole in the shape of a teardrop. "You've seen this before," she says. You blink, unsure, until you remember. The drawing Sabine gave you. The blindfolded woman. The key. "What's behind there?" you ask. Aurore doesn't answer. "That depends on what you believe," she says. "Some say it's a sanctuary, others a trap. But it holds the truth. Or a piece of it. You don't open the door. Not yet. You're not ready. Instead, you ask about Claire." Aurore sighs. She'll be gone by morning, moved somewhere quiet, isolated. She'll be monitored for signs of usefulness, beauty, fertility, obedience. If she fails to enchant the right man, she'll be passed along to another, or dismissed. You already know what dismissed means here. You go back to your room before dawn. The palace corridors are half lit, silent, smelling of old wine and stale perfume. A maid walks past with smeared makeup and her shoes in her hand. No one speaks. The historical fact. Royal courts often maintained spaces for training and grooming girls as political offerings, sometimes labelled as salons, sometimes as cultural education. But beneath the surface, these were often pretextual. Certain girls were pre-selected for high-status liaisons, their every move orchestrated to seduce power. It wasn't romance, it was strategy. Fringe fact: in the 18th century Russia, the Empress reportedly maintained a private cadre of young women known as the Silent Bloomers, trained from childhood to serve foreign dignitaries during visits. They were never officially acknowledged, and most disappeared into arranged marriages, or vanished entirely. Their existence is pieced together only through obscure letters and coded diaries. The debate among scholars? Some insist that these systems were known to, and accepted by, the royal women themselves, who saw such arrangements as necessary evils in the machinery of state. Others argue that many queens and noblewomen were themselves victims of these same machines, silenced for objecting, or reshaped to fit roles they never agreed to play. The next morning you find Claire's chamber empty, not just unoccupied, scrubbed, sheets folded, mirror gone, the rug rolled away like no one ever lived there. Her name is erased from the roster. Sabine won't meet your eyes. You wander the garden paths in silence. The rose bushes have been trimmed so precisely they look fake. A gardener hums a soft, sad song under his breath as he clips a white blossom and tosses it to the ground. Behind the hedge you hear whispering. Two young girls, maybe 11, maybe 12, giggling over a folded scrap of paper. You peek. It's a sketch. A woman in a crimson dress. One of the girls says, "That's the one they say turns into a fox." You watch them for a moment. They're not afraid. Not yet. You walk away before they see you. Back in the Hall of Queens, you press the panel open again. You hold the diary in your hands, thumbing through the pages. There are a few entries left, ones you missed before. I heard her scream. They said it was a song. He touched my shoulder and said I was becoming. I don't know what that means, but I didn't sleep that night. If anyone finds this, I hope you are older. I hope you are free. You close the diary and sit in the dark for a long time. Then you take the sketch, the blindfolded woman with the key, and return to Aurore's chamber. The keyhole waits. Your hand trembles as you raise the paper. You're not ready. You might never be ready. But you press it against the door anyway, and this time the stone clicks. The click isn't loud. It's the softest kind of mechanical sigh, like something ancient waking from a very long sleep. You pause with your hand on the cold stone, half expecting bells to ring or guards to storm in. But no one comes, no alarms, no footsteps, just the gentle hush of the palace breathing as usual, oblivious or uncaring. You glance back at Aurore, who stands completely still, arms folded, watching with a quiet expression that could mean anything. She nods once. You push the door open. Behind it is a narrow, spiralling staircase. The air shifts immediately. Cooler, older. The scent of stone and wax hits you first, then something sharper beneath it, like old ink or dried herbs. Sabine presses in behind you, clutching the hem of your sleeve. She doesn't speak, and neither do you. There's no conversation down here, just gravity and breath. The stairs descend for far longer than you expect. Long enough that you lose your sense of distance. Every echo becomes suspect. Eventually the steps level out, opening into a corridor not carved but sculpted. Smooth walls lined with delicate iron sconces long burned out. There are no windows, no light but what you carry. You follow the corridor until you reach the first room. It's not what you expect. It's a study, or once was. A writing desk sits in the centre, half collapsed under the weight of old books and decayed parchment. A tapestry hangs crooked on the far wall, its colours long faded. The subject seems religious, something biblical but not quite. A woman with a crown and a sword standing over a kneeling man whose face has been purposefully scratched away. You feel that odd lurch in your stomach again. Something unspoken, pressing in. Sabine runs her finger along the edge of the desk, then lifts it to show the dust. No one's been here in years. You start to understand. This isn't just a hidden passage. It's a forgotten one. The next room is worse, or better, depending on how much truth you can handle. It's a small gallery. Portraits line the walls, only women, all unnamed, all unfamiliar, not queens or noblewomen, no jewellery, no insignia, just faces, some frightened, some defiant. A few smile faintly, but most just stare, as if daring you to look away. You don't. Sabine's voice is hushed. I think these were the girls. You ask which girls? All of them. You study each face, one by one, and something begins to form. A timeline, maybe. The first few portraits show girls in stiff formal poses painted with care. As you move along the wall, the style loosens, becomes bolder, darker. By the last few, the brushstrokes are almost violent. Eyes oversized, mouths tight, as if the painter was trying to scream through the canvas. You find a small plaque beneath the final portrait. It simply says, Je suis encore ici. I am still here. The historical fact. Many royal palaces employed private painters for the express purpose of recording not just the faces of nobles, but of the courtly companions who circulated through unofficial channels. These portraits were rarely displayed publicly. Some were even destroyed upon political shifts. But whispers of secret collections, like the Gallery of the Unremembered rumoured to exist beneath Chateau de Blois, persisted across generations. Fringe fact. A few of those secret portraits are said to include symbols hidden in plain sight, a single eye in the background, an animal tucked into the embroidery, or a cryptic phrase scrawled under layers of paint. According to some accounts, these weren't signatures. They were warnings, traces of girls who didn't go quietly. The scholarly debate? Most academic historians dismiss the idea of a deliberate underground network of royal women who recorded their exploitation in code, calling it folklore, feminist fantasy, or wishful thinking. But there's growing pushback from researchers exploring overlooked correspondences, servant testimony, and discarded artwork that suggests something did exist. Not a rebellion, a record. You and Sabine press deeper into the corridor. Eventually it ends in a narrow wooden door, unmarked and crooked in its frame. You push it open together, where it's another chamber, but this one is entirely different. At first you think it's empty, but then you see her. She's sitting on a small bench in the centre of the room, lit by a shaft of light coming through a barred window high above. She's dressed plainly, hair cropped short, hands resting on her knees. At first you think she's a servant or maybe a vision, but then she looks up and smiles. You found it, she says. You don't know who she is, you want to ask, but she shakes her head. No names here, she says, just stories. She pats the bench beside her. You and Sabine sit, barely breathing. She begins talking. She tells you she was a lady in waiting once, like Sabine, assigned to a princess who cried every night after the candles were blown out. She tells you how the princess would wet the hem of her nightgown so she could say she'd spilled water and avoid undressing in front of the wrong eyes. She tells you how one day, a letter meant for the princess ended up in her own hands, and it changed everything. What was in the letter? Sabine whispers. The woman smiles again, but it's sharp this time. A list, she says, of girls, ranked, labelled, with symbols next to their names. She pulls something from her sleeve, a torn corner of parchment, yellowed and fragile. You read the top. Eligible for observation, secondary group, underage. Below it 10 names, Claire's among them. So is someone called Mademoiselle A, asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. You freeze. Could that be Adelheid? The woman stands and moves to the far wall, where an iron shelf holds rows of boxes, each labelled in identical scrawl. This place, it's not a tomb, she says. It's an archive. We've kept everything we could. Letters, notes, threads, even pieces of clothing. You open one of the boxes, inside a scrap of pink ribbon, embroidered in gold. La favorisée, the favoured. You swallow hard. Sabine moves beside you, shaking. Why are you telling us this? She asks. The woman replies without looking. Because it's starting again. That night, back in your chamber, you sit with the diary again, hands trembling. There's one last entry. I buried the key behind the statue of the Queen who never bore sons. They'll never think to look there. She wasn't valuable. You know exactly where that is. Tomorrow you'll go, because now you need answers. No, more than that. You want to remember, you don't sleep. Not really. The palace has that effect. Sleep becomes a thing that happens to other people, girls still naive enough to believe they're safe in their feathered beds. Instead, you lie there in silence, eyes fixed on the canopy overhead, watching candlelight flicker across the silk like ghosts trying to form words. The final line of the diary repeats in your mind like a chime. The statue of the queen who never bore sons. You've passed her before. She stands alone in the east garden, a sombre figure of white marble barely noticed by visitors or courtiers. She was never beloved. No lineage, no legacy, no powerful sons to carry her name. The court buried her in silence long before the earth took her, which is exactly why she's perfect for hiding something. Just before sunrise, you wrap yourself in a grey cloak and slip down the servants' passage. The halls are still sleeping. Only the palace cats and the occasional yawning maid roam at this hour. You avoid the main garden paths, ducking behind hedges and beneath stone arches until you reach her. There she is, Queen Henriette. No children, no scandals, no glory. Just stone lips and a gaze pointed toward the ground like she's already resigned herself to being forgotten. You kneel in the gravel at her feet. The morning air is sharp and your fingers go numb as you press into the dirt searching. The statue's base is weather-worn, with hairline cracks curling across its surface like veins. You find a groove along the bottom, unnaturally straight, too clean. Someone chiselled this with care. You dig. The soil gives way faster than you expect. After a few minutes, your fingers hit something hard, smooth. You scrape around it carefully and pull out a small wooden box, no larger than a jewellery case. It's unadorned except for a mark burned into the top, a single eye, half shut. Inside is the key, not a skeleton key like in stories. This one's delicate, filigreed silver with a black ribbon wrapped around the shaft. It's cold in your palm, heavy with implication. You don't know what it opens, but you know who will. Sabine meets you in the birdcage just before the rest of the attendants begin to stir. You don't need to say anything. She sees the box in your hand and nods. She's been expecting this. "We show her," she whispers. "Tonight." She means Aurore. The day unfolds slowly, a grinding wheel of rituals and routines. You help dress a baroness who smells like stale lilac and entitlement. You pour tea for a duchess who forgets your name even though you've served her all week. The palace continues its theatre. The masquerade never ends. It only changes costumes. You spot Gabrielle in the Queen's salon, seated perfectly still as a painter begins her portrait. She looks straight ahead, chin lifted just enough to be considered alluring. Her gown is the same shade of coral as the Queen's favourite drapes. A coincidence? Of course not. Everything here is deliberate. You glance at her hands. They're shaking. When you meet her eyes, she doesn't blink, just the smallest twitch of her mouth. Then she looks away. That night, you and Sabine return to Aurore's chamber. She's waiting for you by the fire, nursing a chipped teacup. Her hair is looser now, eyes tired. "You found it," she says before you even speak. You place the key on the table. She stares at it for a long time. "There's another chamber," she says, "deeper, one they walled off after a girl escaped. That key was made for her. It fits a lock most believe was destroyed." You ask if the girl survived. Aurore looks at you solemn. She did, but not for long. They sent her to the colonies, married her off to a man 4 times her age. She died 2 winters later. Fever, they said. But I think she just stopped fighting. You ask why anyone would keep the key if the door was sealed. She exhales. Because hope is hard to bury. She leads you and Sabine down a different corridor this time, behind a tapestry depicting Diana, the goddess of the hunt, flanked by wolves. You descend again, farther than before, into a section of the palace that smells less like stone and more like earth. Like a basement, but deeper. Older. You reach a door, narrower than the others, with a rusted iron handle and no visible keyhole, until you touch it. Then just like before, the mechanism shifts. A groove opens, the key slides in, click, the door creaks open. What lies beyond is not a room, it's a vault. The air hits you like a forgotten season, cold, dry and heavy with memory. Candles line the walls in tall iron sconces. Strange. They're fresh. Someone's been maintaining them. In the centre is a chair. At first it looks like a throne. Carved wood, high back, padded arms. But the longer you stare, the more wrong it feels. Mirrors cover every inch. Not polished to clarity, but warped, funhouse style. dozens of small panes angled to reflect the sitter from every conceivable direction. There's a cushion on the seat stained, faint reddish smears around the edges. The mirror chair, you've heard it mentioned in whispers, a seat of observation, of performance, where girls were placed, stripped of their layers, emotional and otherwise, and made to sit while nobles watched. The idea wasn't to touch, the idea was to see, and seeing in this place was power. Sabine runs a hand along the armrest. They made them sit for hours, she says, to see if they would break, or blush, or disobey. You see a second door at the far end of the vault, locked from the outside. Aurora doesn't move to open it. Beyond that is the archive, she says softly. The real one. She turns to you. But before I let you in, you need to understand what's in there doesn't stay inside. Once you know it, it's yours, and you have to carry it. You nod. She unlocks the door. Inside is a room filled with shelves, stacked high with bundles wrapped in silk and tied with coloured thread. Each colour means something. Red for letters, blue for objects, gold for names. You take down a gold bundle. Inside, a list. Names. Dozens, maybe hundreds. Some you recognise and some have been forgotten. At the bottom of the first page, a signature. Gabriel, entry confirmed. The date is yesterday. You hand the paper to Sabine. She stares at it for a long time, then folds it gently and puts it in her pocket. The historical fact. Hidden chambers beneath palaces are not just myth. Excavations in places like Schönbrunn and Fontainebleau have revealed sealed-off wings, forgotten tunnels, and storage vaults with no official record. Whether they were used for secret archives or more sinister purposes remains unproven. But the silence speaks louder than fact. Fringe fact. The mirror chair has no formal history, but rumours persist in court records and servant journals, always vague, always implied. A seat of evaluation, used to determine worthiness, purity, or something even less nameable. The scholarly debate. Some claim these stories are exaggerated. Misreadings of ritual, metaphor stretch too far. Others believe they represent an unspoken architecture of control, the physical manifestation of how power watched, chose, and disposed of girls who were never meant to matter. Aurora closes the archive door behind you. You've seen enough, she says, but you know better. This is only the beginning. You don't speak on the way back up, not because there's nothing to say, but because there's too much. The words stack up behind your teeth, jostling for a way out, but none seem worth breaking the silence that settled over you and Sabine like a second cloak. The air grows warmer the closer you come to the main levels of the palace, but it feels thinner too, like returning to the surface after discovering the bones beneath the floorboards. When you part ways, it's with a glance and the smallest nod. That's all either of you can give right now. You head back toward your chamber, weaving through corridors that feel different now, less grand, more theatrical. Everything is too polished, too composed, too carefully arranged to be believed. You can't unsee the underworld now. Every chandelier looks like a disguise. Every painting of a smiling royal woman feels like a warning. You reach your room just as the morning bells begin, and suddenly the day begins like every other. Except now, you know, you're helping dress the Comtesse de Vigny today. Her perfume hits you like an insult, something powdery and sweet, designed to conceal rather than invite. She flinches when you pin her lace too tightly, but she doesn't scold you. She just looks in the mirror a beat too long, as if trying to decide whether she still belongs in the world it reflects. Later, you're sent to assist in the tea salon, where the younger girls gather under the eye of the Queen's second cousin, a woman known only as Madame Renée. Renée doesn't teach etiquette exactly. She teaches choreography, how to speak without committing, smile without inviting, and lower your gaze just enough to suggest mystery without weakness. It's the language of submission, repackaged as refinement. She's having the girls practice the thrice-fluttered fan when Gabrielle arrives. She glides in late, no apology, her lips painted a little too red. You can see it in her face. Something happened. Something new. Something permanent. But she plays the role well. Takes her seat with elegance. Lifts her fan with a wrist that's learned not to tremble. You bring her a cup of tea. As you lean in, she whispers, "I saw him." You straighten, pretending not to hear. She continues anyway. "They put me in the mirror chair. Said it was a right. That it proved I could handle power." She stirs her tea slowly, though neither of you believe the leaves are meant to be drunk. It was just watching, she says, but it wasn't just watching. You glance around, no one's listening, or everyone is pretending not to. He didn't say a word, she adds, but when I looked up just once, he smiled. You want to ask who he is, but you already know. The king, or worse, someone with the king's permission. Gabrielle sets her teacup down and looks at you, really looks at you, for the first time. Next time, it might be you, she says gently. They rotate. You feel the cold slide into your chest like a draft through a cracked window. The historical fact. In some courts, particularly in late Baroque France and Prussia, adolescent girls were subjected to a series of informal evaluations that blurred the line between etiquette lessons and grooming. While never recorded in official records, numerous journals and servant testimonials suggest a system of private presentations, often referred to as evenings of petals or mirror ceremonies, depending on the region. These were not parties, they were selections. The fringe fact. A supposedly apocryphal manual, L'art de l'observation délicate, was rumoured to circulate among certain aristocrats. It offered detailed instructions on how to test a young noblewoman's poise under examination. No copies have ever been found, but quotes attributed to it have appeared in several confiscated letters. The scholarly debate? Some historians argue these practices were exaggerated over time, twisted by scandal and moral panic. Others insist the lack of records is precisely the point. When something is both shameful and necessary to those in power, it is buried, not forgotten. Back in the birdcage that evening, the girls are quieter than usual. Even the gossip feels muted, like everyone's tiptoeing around the elephant they've all now seen, but dare not name. You hear murmurs of Claire. Someone says she was seen boarding a carriage bound for the countryside. Another swears she was spotted at the convent outside of Vienne. The truth? It doesn't matter. She's gone. Gabrielle doesn't join the birdcage that night. You suspect she's somewhere being fitted for a new dress, or perhaps she's been sent to practice walking in heels down marble without looking at her reflection. Maybe she's already learned not to leave footprints. Sabine finds you later, sitting on the stone bench beneath the Queen's statue. She holds out a letter. It was hidden in my bodice, she says. Slipped in when I was with the Queen this morning. You take it, unfold it. It's a list. Another one, but this time it's girls to be rotated. Your name is near the bottom. Your stomach knots. You ask Sabine what it means. It means you have a choice, she says. You can keep your head down, hope they don't pick you soon. Or, you whisper, she looks at you. Or we make a move. You stare at the statue of Queen Henriette, who never bore sons, who was carved in stone and forgotten by everyone but ghosts. What kind of move, you ask? Sabine leans in close. There's a tunnel, she says, beyond the archives. It runs beneath the west wing and out past the hunting stables. No one guards it. No one remembers it's even there. Not unless someone shows them the map. You look up. You have the map? She nods once. I know where it is. The question now isn't whether escape is possible. It's whether it's survivable. Because running means more than just slipping away in the dark. It means knowing you'll be hunted. It means becoming one of the unspoken. It means war. The next morning you pretend everything is normal. That you slept well. That you didn't lie awake tracing the list in your mind, counting how many names were ahead of yours, how many days, maybe hours you had left. You go through the motions, washing, dressing, pinning your hair into the perfect shape of composure. But your hands are slower today. The stillness inside you isn't calm, it's strategy.
You know now that the palace isn't simply a place, it's a process. A slow alchemy that turns girls into symbols, then objects, then silence. Sabine's words echo through your head as you walk the corridors like you belong. There's a tunnel. 3 words that mean possibility, or delusion, or death. But you're choosing not to care which. Sabine can't go looking for the map herself, not without raising questions. Her movements are too closely watched. Ever since she served the Queen directly last week, she's been treated like a scent the other girls can't quite place. Fascination mixed with caution. So you volunteer. You don't even hesitate. She tells you where to start. The old conservatory. It's not used anymore. Not since the fire that took the eastern wall. But supposedly, there's a hidden shelf behind a cracked panel, just below a window that no longer opens. The map is inside a book. Not just any book. A treatise on star charts, written in Latin, bound in deep green leather. You wait until midday, when the older courtiers drift toward their wine and the younger ones are corralled into music lessons. You feign an errand, a spilled inkwell, a search for replacement parchment. No one questions you. The conservatory smells like charcoal and forgotten seasons. You step carefully around the blackened floor tiles, scanning the shelves. Most of the books are faded, moth-bitten, or fake entirely, props meant to keep the room looking full. But in the back, behind the panel Sabine described, you find the shelf. Your fingers brush past brittle pages, thick spines, and then, there. Green leather, gold embossed, cold as regret. You pull it free. Inside is the map, folded tight and pressed flat between two pages that describe the alignment of stars during a lunar eclipse in 1644. Fitting, really. The palace aligns its cruelty the same way, always in shadow. The map itself is hand-drawn, messy, desperate, but clear. A tunnel begins in the archives, winds beneath the West Wing, marked only as storage in official records, and exits through a crumbling postern gate just beyond the hunting stables. From there, it's forest, then town, then the unknown. You refold the map, slipping it into the hollowed-out base of a ribbon box you were instructed to deliver later to the Queen's dresser. You'll pass the box to Sabine when no one's looking. Later that day, as you serve tea in the Queen's drawing room, you see Gabriel again. Her dress is ivory this time, cinched at the waist so tightly she walks like a statue being moved on wheels. A pale yellow rose is pinned to her shoulder, the Queen's signal of favor. She doesn't look at you, but her hands are trembling again. You want to ask if she's been rotated yet, if she's had to sit in the chair again, if they've started calling her by a new name. But Gabrielle doesn't speak anymore, not in places with windows. You glance at the Queen. She's laughing, at something a duke has just whispered. Her eyes are glittering with wine and triumph. And yet she's not really looking at anyone. You understand now that even the Queen plays a part. She was once where you are. Maybe worse. Maybe she fought and lost, or didn't fight at all. You wonder if she regrets anything. Then you realize she probably doesn't have time to. That evening, you slip the map to Sabine as you pass her in the corridor outside the linen room. A simple exchange. Your box for her folded towel. No one notices. That's the trick. Surviving here means being so visible you vanish. In the birdcage, the talk is unusually sharp. 2 of the younger girls are missing, sent to the Queen's Country retreat for summer etiquette study, which is what they call it when you're being groomed for something off the books. Someone mentions a 3rd girl, Isabel, being caught trying to write to her sister. They say she's been sent to a convent in the mountains, but you know what that really means. Gone. The historical fact? Letters from palace girls were often intercepted, censored, or outright destroyed before ever leaving the grounds. Only sanctioned correspondence, dictated, transcribed, and sealed by handlers, was allowed out. In some cases, girls were punished for merely owning a pen and parchment without permission. The fringe fact? There are accounts of ghost letters written in invisible ink made from lemon juice or milk, passed using lace handkerchiefs or even stitched into dress hems. One maid was supposedly executed after officials discovered a love letter sewn into the lining of her bodice, addressed to a member of the clergy. The scholarly debate? Some historians insist these tales are exaggerated, overheated romanticism from centuries of melodrama. Others argue the lack of evidence is precisely what proves them. Who archives a secret that gets you disappeared? Later that night, you return to Aurore. You tell her you have the map. She doesn't look surprised. Instead, she says, "Then we have until the next full moon." You do the math. 6 days, 6 days to prepare, to choose, to decide who gets to come and who gets left behind. You ask her how many have tried before. She exhales through her nose. Too many. You ask how many made it. She doesn't answer right away. Then, 3, that I know of. 3. That night, you sit by your tiny window, watching the clouds move across the stars. Somewhere out there, a world continues. Trains run, markets open, children laugh without being cataloged. You try to imagine your body inside that world, not just surviving, but breathing, speaking, laughing again. You realize you can't. Not yet, but maybe soon. You look at your hands, small, steady, and you whisper to no one, "I want out." The walls don't answer, but for the first time, they don't seem entirely deaf either. The next 6 days arrive with a softness that feels suspicious, like the calm surface of a lake right before something drags you under. Everything in the palace continues with unnerving smoothness. Too smooth, like someone behind the scenes is tightening the strings. The queen hosts small dinners. The king is said to be hunting in the North Woods, which everyone knows means something else entirely. The girls go on with their lessons in etiquette and embroidery, and the older ladies comment on how serene the palace feels this week. It's the serenity of a body after bleeding out. You and Sabine begin making quiet arrangements. You can't leave alone, not morally and not practically. If you're seen vanishing, your absence might go unnoticed for a few days. But if you take someone else with you, someone the palace still counts, you buy time, a delay, the illusion of presence, and you both know who it has to be. Gabrielle, she's being crushed in real time. You've seen it. The little breaks, the day she forgot how to hold a teacup, the moment her eyes glazed over when a count commented on her waist. She's unraveling, thread by thread, and no one's even trying to tie her back together. That's what they want. Girls who fall apart quietly. So you wait for the right moment. It comes on the third day. You find her in the music salon, seated at the harpsichord, playing the same haunting series of notes over and over, an unfinished melody. The instructor isn't watching. He's arguing with a baroness about sheet music. You sit beside her. "Do you want to leave?" you whisper. She doesn't stop playing, but she says, "Yes." You tell her when, where, what to bring, how not to look hopeful, and that's that. The next morning, something strange happens. You're called, not summoned, but called, to attend the Duchess of Lorraine, a powerful ally of the Queen, known for her pinched mouth and hawkish observation of every girl within reach. She's requested you by name. You spend an hour being brushed, powdered, and cinched into a new dress. A soft dove gray gown trimmed in pearls, the kind of thing girls don't wear unless they're being presented. Your stomach knots. This wasn't in the plan, and yet here you are, stepping into the private drawing room of a woman who could end you with a look. She offers you tea. You accept. She doesn't touch hers. "I've been watching you," she says. Not a question, a pronouncement. You wait. You're quiet, diligent, observant. She takes a long pause. Too observant, perhaps. You freeze. She stands and crosses to the window, her lace cuffs dragging like spider webs. "You remind me of a girl I once knew," she says, voice light. "She was clever, not born to this life, but determined to master it. She played all her cards right, until she didn't." You don't respond. She turns to face you. "Be careful," she says, eyes sharp. "This place doesn't tolerate curiosity, especially from girls who don't know when to stop asking questions." Then she waves her hand. Dismissed. You walk out slowly, keeping your face neutral, but your heart is pounding so loud it drowns out the sound of your own footsteps. Sabine finds you minutes later and pulls you into a linen closet, where the smell of soap and starch makes everything feel absurdly mundane. "She knows," you whisper. Sabine doesn't even blink. Of course she does. You stare at her. "She's not going to stop us?" Sabine bites her lip, then smiles. Just a little. Maybe not everyone here has forgotten who they used to be. The historical fact? Some high-ranking women in royal courts, duchesses, aunts, even widowed queens, were known to subtly protect younger girls from dangerous liaisons or unwanted appointments. They couldn't openly oppose the system, but they could interfere. Delay a marriage, redirect a suitor, send a girl on a fabricated religious retreat. The fringe fact? There's speculation that one particular duchess in Louis XV's court secretly ran an escape network for girls targeted by nobles, hiding them in country estates and forging convent identities until it was safe to smuggle them to Spain or Venice. The records are sparse, but the letters hint. The scholarly debate? The question remains whether these acts of protection were calculated power plays or genuine acts of resistance. Some scholars argue these women used saving girls as a form of influence currency. Others believe they were trying to hold back a tide they couldn't stop. That night, the palace hosts a quiet supper for visiting nobles. You and Sabine take the chance to scout the archive entrance again, just to be sure. Everything is as it was, but something in the air has shifted. It's not just your imagination, there's movement, quiet signals, phrases spoken with coded intent. And then, the next day, the whispers begin. About Gabrielle, they say she fainted during breakfast, that she vomited twice the night before, that a physician was called, one known for discretion. Sabine finds you in the conservatory. She's being tested, she says. You already know what that means. They think Gabrielle is pregnant. You don't know whether to feel relieved or terrified. On one hand, it could mean she's spared rotation. She'll be coddled, protected, cloistered away in a luxurious prison. But it also means they'll watch her more closely, guard her, lock her down. You change the plan. She can't come with you. Not now. You tell her that evening. She doesn't cry, just nods. I thought it might be too late, she says. But thank you for offering me the choice. No one else ever has. You leave her with a small token, a broken pearl from your first dress fitting. She smiles and says she'll hide it in her pillow. So I don't forget I was a person, she says. You and Sabine return to the vault on the last night. You check the chair, the archive, the door to the tunnel. It's still there, waiting. You run your fingers along the stone wall, and for the first time, it feels like something you could push against and win. You go back to your room, lie down, pretend. Tomorrow you leave, or try to. But as you close your eyes, someone knocks at your door. Not a lady, not a friend, a guard. You open it with your heart in your throat. You've been requested, he says. Requested. You ask by whom. He doesn't answer, just steps aside. And behind him, the queen, smiling and holding a letter, folded, sealed, with your name on it. There's a kind of smile that means nothing, the kind you practice in front of a mirror until your face gets tired and your soul feels a little thinner. The queen is wearing that smile now, soft, ambiguous, wrapped in grace but hollow at the center. She extends the sealed letter as if offering you a gift, something delicate and sweet, but her eyes tell you it's neither. You take the envelope. It's heavy. Heavier than it should be for a few lines of ink. Your name is written across the front in a precise, unfamiliar hand, one used to writing orders, not poetry. The queen waits. She's dressed in a muted gown, the color of aged bone, a shade fashionable for mourning, but still elegant enough to pretend otherwise. Her hair is swept up, her throat bare, vulnerable almost. It's a trap, of course. Everything she wears, every angle of her face, is a lie polished to perfection. Open it, she says, with the softness of a lullaby. So you do. Inside, a single sheet. You read the words once, then again. You are summoned for the first selection. Prepare. That's all it says. No signature, no explanation. Just those 9 words, and a pressed wax seal with the royal crest. You stare at it, unable to move, until the queen speaks again. It means what you think it means, she says. You finally meet her eyes. Why me? The queen smiles wider, not kindly. Because you've been seen, noticed, evaluated. You try to swallow, but your mouth is dry. She steps closer, her voice lowers. You've held yourself back. That's dangerous. Men like to think they're the only ones holding the leash. You can't speak. She leans in slightly. Be perfect, she whispers. And they'll leave you with nothing. Be clever, and you might survive. Then she straightens, turns, walks away. The door shuts behind her like a verdict. You stay frozen for a long time, the letter still in your hand, the seal already broken. It's not really a choice, not anymore. First selection is code. You've heard the term before. Girls summoned to these events don't come back changed. They come back less, paler, smoothed down, like the corners of their minds have been sanded off. You rush to Sabine. You find her in the laundry hall, pretending to sort linens while a noblewoman's maid sobs quietly over a broken pearl earring. You pull her aside, press the letter into her hand. She reads it, and for the first time since you met her, Sabine looks afraid. "Tomorrow night," she says. "They move quickly after these." You tell her you can't run tonight. The tunnel's not ready. Supplies aren't in place. You don't know where you'd go. Sabine shakes her head. If you wait, you'll be gone before you ever reach the door. You don't ask what she means. You already know. Once they take you to the selection, you don't walk yourself back. They return your body, not always your will. Together, you sit in the birdcage and make a new plan. There's no time for elegance, no chance for a clean escape. You'll slip out during the evening bell, when most of the guards are distracted by the Queen's wine hour. You'll wear a servant's cloak, Sabine's, and take the waste route down to the lower kitchens. From there, through the fire passage to the archives, past the vault, into the tunnel. You'll leave tonight. But before you do, you need to know. One more answer. You return to Aurore. She's waiting. She always is. You ask her plainly, what happens in the selection? She doesn't flinch. They watch you. They speak in riddles. Sometimes they ask you to undress. Sometimes they don't have to. You feel sick? Do they touch? Not all, she says. But some touch with their eyes, their words, their power. She offers you something, a flask of bitter wine. You drink, not because you're thirsty, but because you need to swallow something that isn't fear. Then she says, "There's one more thing in the archive, something I didn't show you." You follow her back down, through the iron door, past the mirror chair, now cloaked in a shroud of black silk. She opens a drawer in the far wall, pulls out a bundle wrapped in crimson. Inside is a journal, not the child's diary. This one is older. The handwriting loops, mature, fierce. You flip through pages filled with rage, disguised as observation. They dress us in beauty so they can devour it slowly. The room was cold. He commented on my skin. I told him it was the weather. He laughed like I was clever. I wanted to scream. Survival here is not about kindness. It's about invisibility. You close the journal. Ask who wrote it. Aurore smiles. I did. The historical fact? There are documented accounts, scattered and vague, of women in royal courts who kept personal journals never meant to be seen. Some were destroyed. Some survived through coded entries passed as religious reflection. Their existence confirms what the records don't, that the palace had eyes, but so did the girls. Fringe fact? One such journal, found in the collapsed wing of an Austrian estate, included pressed flowers between each page. When tested, some of those petals were from plants known to induce miscarriage or sleep. Messages hidden in nature, desperation turned into art. The scholarly debate? Whether these writings should be treated as historical fact or personal mythology. Some scholars argue they exaggerate, reflect trauma through a distorted lens. Others say the distortion is the truth, that what happened was too monstrous to write plainly. You thank Aurore. She kisses your forehead like a benediction. Then you and Sabine begin the final steps. A cloak, a diversion, a bundle of dried fruit and soft shoes. As you approach the passage, Sabine whispers, "If we make it to the trees, we'll be shadows." You nod. You're ready. But as you reach the hallway that leads to the archives, your heart stops. 3 guards, standing in the corridor, casual, but positioned too precisely to be coincidence. You pull back, hide behind the pillar. "They know," Sabine whispers. You look at her. "Who told?" She doesn't answer, but her eyes flick to the left. "Gabrielle." You spot her walking away, her white gown glowing like a lie. She never said goodbye. You don't scream. You don't chase. You don't crumble into a pile of betrayal in the dark corridor. That would be a luxury. And girls in palaces, especially girls who know what happens in the mirror room and beneath it, aren't allowed luxuries. You stand there in the shadow of a marble column, your heart beating out the seconds like a ticking fuse, watching Gabrielle glide away as if she didn't just sentence you to hell. Sabine is already pulling you back, her breath sharp against your ear. We go to the chapel, now. You want to ask why, what good a chapel will do against armed guards and broken trust. But then you remember the old blueprints, the hidden alcove behind the altar. Another tunnel, narrower, older, forgotten, but not by Aurore. She'd mentioned it once, offhandedly, as a rumor passed between maids who spent too much time polishing stone. You don't argue, you move. Sabine leads you past the torchlit hall, ducking beneath a servant's stairwell, through a door so warped it looks like it might splinter at your touch. Behind it, silence. Cool, blessed silence. You reach the chapel just as the evening bells start to ring. It's empty, as expected. The nobility have no use for God unless someone important dies or the wine has run out. But the air smells of old incense and forgotten prayers, the kind that cling to the walls like grief. Candles flicker in iron sconces, most half-burned, all ignored. You step onto the cold marble, boots slipping slightly, and make your way to the front. The altar looms. It's massive, oak, carved with the image of the Magdalene. She looks down at you with an expression you can't decipher. Pity, judgment, warning. Sabine drops to her knees beside it, feeling along the stone floor with her fingertips. Here, she says, help me. You kneel, heart still racing, hands searching along with hers. And then, beneath the carved edge of the altar, you find it. A panel. Wood, softer than it should be. A tiny metal latch hidden in the folds of the Magdalene's robe. You pull. It opens with a gasp. Beneath the altar, a passage, barely wide enough for one. You slide inside first. Sabine follows. The door clicks shut behind you, sealing the air into stillness. You feel the dampness instantly. Moss on stone, the chill of decades without sun. It smells of mildew and old earth, but you breathe it in like salvation. You begin to crawl. It's slow, cramped. The stone presses in on all sides, and every few feet there's another turn, another slant. But the map Sabine memorized guides you. 20 steps down, turn left at the lantern hook, count 7 ridges in the wall. You follow it like a ritual. Above you, the palace continues. The ball is underway. Music bleeds faintly through the stone. Harps, maybe, or viols. You imagine powdered faces laughing over veal and gossiping about a girl who may or may not have run away. You picture Gabriel sipping golden wine and smiling too politely. You try not to hate her. You fail. Eventually, the tunnel widens. You stand. You're in a stone chamber, circular, barely lit by cracks above that let in slivers of moonlight. You can smell horses nearby. Hay, manure. The stables are close. You're almost there. Sabine hands you a bundle. Clothes, a plain wool dress, sturdy boots, a hood, the costume of invisibility. You strip quickly, abandoning your silk and lace like a second skin you no longer need. When you're done, Sabine presses something into your palm. A coin. Silver. Heavy. What's this for? You ask. She shrugs. Bread or bribery, depends how far you get. Then she hugs you. Tight. Like she knows this is the last time. You pull back. Aren't you coming? She hesitates, and then she says, the thing you feared. I can't. Not yet. Your chest tightens. You said, I know, but if I leave now, the whole plan falls apart. If they think we both ran, they'll shut every route. But if they think only you did, you shake your head. You'll be punished. She smiles, small and tired. They already think I'm dangerous. This just confirms it. You want to fight her, beg. But the clock is running out, and the tunnel waits. Go, she says, and this time her voice cracks. Don't make this mean nothing. You nod. One step, then another, then you're in the final crawl space, the cold air of the outside world brushing your skin like a warning and a promise. You push the last grate open, and you're out. Outside. The sky is dark, freckled with stars, the moon a half smile. Trees line the edge of the palace grounds. Beyond them, a road. Beyond that, 100 kinds of unknown. You run. You don't look back. You run until the trees swallow you, until the air tastes like leaves instead of perfume, until the last sound of the palace dies in your ears. The historical fact? Escape from royal palaces was rare, but not impossible. There are confirmed records of at least 4 noble girls in 17th and 18th century Europe who fled arranged marriages or exploitative court positions, vanishing into convents or disguising themselves as traveling performers. 2 were captured, 2 were never found. Fringe fact: one escapee from the Danish court supposedly survived by posing as a physician's apprentice for 3 years, eventually marrying a sailor and sailing to the West Indies. Her story exists only in fragments, notes scribbled in the margins of a ship's logbook. The scholarly debate? The question of agency haunts every retelling. Were these girls resisting or simply surviving? Were they escaping one prison only to enter another? What counts as freedom when your entire world has been designed to cage you? You reach a hill overlooking the palace, and there, just for a moment, you stop. The great structure sprawls below like a myth made of marble. Lights flicker in the windows. Music swells faintly in the night air. And somewhere inside it, a girl named Sabine is closing a door she may never open again. You press your hand to your chest, feel the coin she gave you, and you whisper her name, not in sorrow, in gratitude, and in fury, in promise. Then you turn and vanish into the dark. The forest doesn't welcome you, not in the way you imagined when you dreamed of escape. It doesn't throw open its arms or sigh in relief to receive you. It simply is. Cold, damp, indifferent. The trees stretch endlessly above, black bones silhouetted against the moon, their branches like fingers pointing toward nowhere. The wind speaks and hisses through the leaves, and every twig beneath your boot feels like a declaration. Someone is here who shouldn't be. But you keep going. Because the only thing behind you now is the palace, and the memory of velvet walls closing in like jaws. You walk until your legs burn, and your breath feels like steam against your lips, until the silk of court has fully left your skin, and all that remains is the ache of real movement. Hours pass. The moon changes position. An owl cries once. You cross a stream by inching over a fallen log, slick with moss, and when your foot slips, you scrape your palm open on the bark. You don't cry. You don't even curse. You've learned better than to give pain a voice. Eventually, you find the road. It's no more than a dirt path, rutted and overgrown, barely wide enough for a carriage. But it winds east, and east is the only direction Sabine told you to go. She said there'd be a village there, a place too small to be suspicious, too used to the palace's shadow to care what falls out of it. You walk that road with your head down, hands in your cloak, heart thudding like a metronome counting toward something unknown. At dawn, you reach it. A cluster of stone cottages slouched together like old women in conversation. Thin chimneys spit pale smoke. A dog barks once and then goes silent. The scent of bread baking wraps around the buildings like a shawl, but it doesn't comfort you. You're too aware of the eyes behind shutters, of the silence that follows strangers in places like this. You go to the bakery first. It's not a plan exactly, it's instinct. Warmth, food, light. You step inside, and the bell above the door rings a high, nervous note. The baker is a woman with graying hair and flour in her wrinkles. She looks at you once, then down at your boots. They're caked in mud and moss. She doesn't ask questions. "Hungry?" she says. You nod. She slides a heel of bread across the counter. You reach for the silver coin Sabine gave you and place it down carefully, hoping the weight of it makes up for the way your hands tremble. The woman eyes the coin. "You're from the palace," she says. It's not a question. You consider lying, but something in her face tells you she already knows the truth. So you say nothing. Just wrap your fingers around the bread like it's a lifeline. She looks at you a moment longer, then says, "Sit." So you do. She brings you tea, nothing fancy, bitter and too hot, but real. You sip it in silence, the heat curling through your chest like the first whisper of safety. After a while, she sits across from you. "I've seen girls like you before," she says. "They come down from that hill with bleeding hands and eyes that don't match their age. You stare at the table. She keeps talking. Some pass through, some stay. Most say nothing. You finally find your voice. I don't know what to say. She nods. That's the start of healing. The historical fact? Villages surrounding royal estates often became quiet recipients of those cast out, or those who slipped away. Midwives, retired servants, former courtesans, the ones who left before they were destroyed. Some towns kept registers, careful not to record real names. Others simply absorbed the ghosts and asked no questions. Fringe fact? There's a French folktale about a woman known as Mère Blanche, a baker who once served in Versailles and later sheltered runaway girls. According to legend, her rolls were baked with codes, cracks on the crust that told those in the know whether it was safe to stay or time to run again. The scholarly debate? Historians argue over whether stories like Mère Blanche were real or romanticized. Some suggest they were composite myths, based on several women. Others insist they were invented by the court itself, a way to dismiss the idea that anyone ever escaped for good. After all, what's more dangerous than a girl who runs and lives? The baker, whose name is Impossibly Blanche, lets you sleep in her attic. It smells of lavender and dust, and the mattress is lumpy, but it's yours for the night. You curl into it like a question mark, body sore and mind racing. You think of Sabine, of Gabrielle, of the mirror chair and the tunnel and the queen's too smooth smile. You wonder if anyone's noticed yet that you're gone. You wonder who they'll blame. You wake at dusk. Blanche has left a bundle at the foot of the stairs. Bread, a flask of water, a clean chemise, and a note. Go east. There's a convent 2 days from here. The nuns don't ask. She signs it simply, B. You don't know whether you'll go to the convent. You're not ready to decide anything so big. But you leave the house before full dark, slinging the bundle over your shoulder and turning your face toward the rising wind. You take side paths now, avoiding the roads. You don't trust easy routes anymore. By midnight, you've made it to the edge of the woods again. You stop by a creek to wash your face and rinse your hands. The scrape on your palm is scabbing over, the blood like a reminder. You exist. You press your fingers to the earth, feel the chill. Then, as you stand, you catch a flicker of movement across the water. A figure. Far off, cloaked, silent, too far to see clearly, but close enough to know it's not chance. You freeze. They don't follow. Not yet. But you know now what you suspected all along. You're not free. You're hunted. You don't sleep that night. Not with the shape of a figure still etched into the dark behind your eyes. Not with your breath coming in careful, shallow doses like you're trying not to wake the wind. You climb a tree instead, a wide old thing with gnarled limbs that groan beneath you, and wedge yourself between two thick branches. From up here, the forest is a different beast. The sounds carry further. The moon seems close enough to peel open, and the shadows move in ways they shouldn't. You clutch your bundle like it might transform into something useful. A weapon, a shield, a home. But it stays what it is. Bread, water, cloth. Nothing that can save you from what's behind you. At dawn, you climb down, stiff-limbed and aching. The woods smell of damp moss and frost, the kind of chill that seeps into your bones and makes everything feel heavier. You don't see the figure again, but that doesn't mean they're gone. The hunted always assume they're being watched. It's how they stay alive. You keep moving. By midday, you find the convent. It rises from the trees like a secret half-told, stone walls tangled in ivy, a wooden bell tower that leans ever so slightly, as if eavesdropping. You hesitate at the gate. A wooden sign hangs from rusted hooks. Abbé de Sainte-Croix. No guards, no gates. Just a quiet kind of presence. The sort that says, come in if you must, but leave who you were behind. You knock. After a long pause, the door creaks open. A woman in a plain gray habit appears. Her face is lined with years and soft around the eyes. She looks at you like she's seen 1,000 girls before you. Maybe she has. Name? She asks. You open your mouth, but the only thing that comes out is a breath. A sound. something between surrender and defiance. She nods once. We'll call you Marie. Just like that, your old self is gone. Erased, replaced by something simple and serviceable. Marie is not a name that draws attention. Marie is not a name anyone would look for. You step inside. The convent is cold and quiet. No chandeliers here, no velvet drapes. The light comes from narrow windows, the kind that make you feel like the sun has to ask permission to enter. Stone walls, wooden floors, the scent of herbs and candle wax. They show you to a room, if it can be called that. A cot, a stool, a bowl of water, a cross on the wall. No mirror. They feed you soup that tastes like boiled leaves and give you a coarse wool dress that itches your skin raw. Still, it's better than satin and silk that only ever meant display. This fabric doesn't need to impress anyone. It just needs to cover your body. The nuns don't ask questions, but the other girls do. There are 7 of them, all close in age. You can tell by their eyes who's new and who's made peace with the silence. A girl with cropped hair offers you bread your first night. She doesn't speak, just nods once and walks away. Another stares at you across the dining table like she's trying to read your past off your face. You meet one who's bolder than the rest. Her name, her real name, is Elodie. She's not shy about saying it either. They let us pick new ones, she says one evening, sitting beside you in the chapel garden. But I kept mine. I figured if they find me, let them find the right girl. You ask who they is, she shrugs. Take your pick. You learn her story in pieces. She was supposed to marry a man her father owed money to. 40 years old, 3 dead wives, a taste for girls with soft skin, and silence in their lungs. She fled the night before the wedding, dressed as a maid, hid in a cart full of cabbages. The convent took her in. Until they don't, she says. You frown. What do you mean? Elodie glances over her shoulder, then lowers her voice. There's a price for protection. Always is. You ask what kind of price. She looks at you long and hard. They keep records. You don't ask more. You wait until midnight, then sneak out of your room. You remember how to move without sound. The palace taught you well. The convent hallways are easier. No marble, no guards, just wood that creaks when it feels like it. You find the door Elodie described, small, hidden behind a tapestry of Saint Cecilia, patron of silence. Inside is an office. A single candle burns on the desk, and a ledger. You open it. Page after page of names, descriptions, dates. No last names, just ages, distinguishing features, backgrounds, lineage. And in the margins, symbols, a triangle, a circle, a crown. You find your name, Marie, and beside it, a tiny star. No one ever uses stars in convents. You hear a sound and snap the book shut, but you're not alone. Standing in the doorway, a nun, not the one who greeted you. This one is younger, dark-haired, still but not soft. She looks at the ledger, then at you. Looking for your place? She asks. You don't answer. She walks in, picks up the ledger, flips through it until she finds your page. She points to the star. That means someone's already claimed you. You feel your stomach drop. What? She shuts the book and looks at you with something like pity. Not all of us come here to stay. Some of us are just waiting. You ask, waiting for what? She shrugs. To be told where to go next. The historical fact? Many convents across Europe, particularly those near royal estates, operated under a quiet understanding with the nobility. They served as sanctuaries, yes, but also as holding places. For illegitimate daughters, for inconvenient wives, for girls who saw too much. Fringe fact. There are mentions in certain aristocratic correspondences of referrals made to specific convents, coded language that often meant a girl was being stored, trained, or assessed before being reabsorbed into court life under a new name and identity. The scholarly debate? Were these convents complicit or simply surviving? Some historians argue they provided the only protection these girls had. Others suggest they were part of the same system, another layer of velvet draped over iron bars. You return to your room. You sit on the edge of your cot. The night feels thinner now, the silence less kind. You thought you'd escaped, But the palace wasn't just a place, it was a net. And the strings are still tightening. You stay 3 more days at Sainte Croix, though stay might not be the right word for it. You inhabit it. You move through the halls like a shadow with bones, polite and quiet, saying the right things when necessary, and saying nothing when it feels dangerous, which is most of the time. No one speaks openly about what the symbols in the ledger mean. No one says the word claimed, but you know they all saw the star. You know they all understand. You watch the other girls more closely now, the way some of them flinch when a certain bell rings, the way one of them, Lisette, has stopped eating, stopped speaking, and instead spends her days walking the garden paths barefoot, murmuring lines of scripture that don't exist. The nuns don't stop her. They let her unravel. You understand why. This place pretends to offer stillness, safety, but under the surface, it's still the palace, just in different clothes. Elodie corners you in the chapel one morning. She's wearing the same calm expression she always does, but her voice is urgent. You need to go. You blink. What? They came, she says. 2 men. Royal crest on the letter. They met with Sister Thérèse. She smiled too much when she showed them out. That kind of smile means someone's getting paid. You feel your stomach twist. You're sure it's me? Elodie nods. Stars aren't for decoration, Marie. You've already started to hate that name. She slips a folded scrap of paper into your hand. It's a route, not the best one, but it's the one that doesn't involve a leash around your neck. You don't ask her why she's helping. You don't need to. There's a look some girls give other girls, one that says, I see you, because I am you. It's not friendship. It's solidarity born from surviving the same kind of fire. You wait until nightfall. This time you don't go through the tunnels. You slip out the back of the herb garden, past the crumbling wall lined with thorn bushes and old saints. The route Elodie gave you takes you through the forest again, but further south this time, where the land dips into low valleys and the air smells less like secrets and more like mud and animal musk. You sleep in a hollow under a tree, wrapped in your cloak, one eye always open. The next day, you walk for hours. The world outside the palace feels wider now, but that doesn't make it safer. You keep to yourself. You steal a carrot from a cart when no one's looking. You wash your face in a pond and pretend your reflection is someone else. On the second night, you find shelter in an old chapel, half collapsed and overgrown. There's a broken altar and a nest of birds above the pulpit. You light no fire. You eat slowly. You listen. And you hear footsteps. Not animal, not accidental. Measured, careful, human. You press yourself behind what's left of the altar, breath held tight. A shadow crosses the doorway, then a voice. Don't scream. I won't hurt you. You don't scream, but you do reach for the sharp rock you tucked into your bundle days ago. I followed you from Sainte Croix, the voice continues. It's low, male, young. I saw the star. I knew they'd send someone. You step out, slowly, rock still clutched. The boy is maybe 18, dirty blonde hair, sun-browned skin, clothes like a farmer's, but his boots are too clean. His face is familiar, not because you've seen it before, but because you've seen versions of it. Pages, stable boys, the ones that linger at the edges of power, close enough to observe, never close enough to matter. I'm not with them, he says. My sister was. You narrow your eyes. He pulls something from his coat, a ribbon, faded pink, fraying at the edges, embroidered with a crown and the word Adelaide. I never saw her again, he says. You lower the rock. He tells you his name is Luke, that he works for a merchant who runs messages between court and country, that he's been listening, watching, collecting the scraps no one thinks to hide. There are others, he says, girls like you. They get out, but they don't always stay out. Some are dragged back, some just vanish. You ask what he wants. To help, he says simply, because no one helped her. The historical fact? Underground networks existed across Europe in the 18th century, not formal resistance movements, but loose webs of sympathy and secrets. Former servants, midwives, wandering priests. people who saw too much and couldn't forget it. Some passed information, some hid runaways, some just listened. Fringe fact? In the late 1700s, a coded language known as le chuchotement, the whisper, was said to circulate among palace escapees. It involved gestures, sewn patterns, even the arrangement of food on a plate. A silent system for saying, I was there, and I got out. The scholarly debate? Most historians dismiss the idea of a coordinated escape system as romantic fantasy. But some point to specific court disappearances, servant testimonies, and intercepted letters that suggest there was more going on beneath the silk and silver. That even in the most tightly controlled worlds, people still found ways to whisper. Luke doesn't try to touch you, doesn't ask for anything. He just sits on the broken altar and offers you the fire he built earlier, covered carefully with stone to keep the light low. You ask how long he's been following girls like you. He shrugs. 2 years, maybe 3. I've only helped 3 make it to the border. You'd be the 4th. You stare at the flames. They look like silk unraveling. What if I don't want to run forever? You ask. Luke meets your gaze. Then burn it down. You fall asleep beside him, your bundle under your head, the ribbon pressed into your palm. And you dream of Sabine. She's standing in the archive vault, her hand on the mirror chair, her mouth moving. You wake before she finishes the sentence, but you know what she's saying. You know what she's always said. They don't get to win. By morning, the fire is gone, reduced to a smear of ash on the chapel floor, and Luke is already awake, packing what little he has with the silent efficiency of someone used to disappearing quickly. You sit with your back against a crumbling wall, watching the way light filters through what used to be stained glass, now just jagged pieces, casting fractured color across the stone floor. You've always been made of pieces like that. Reflection, not light. Shards, not windows. Luke hands you a crust of bread and says, "We can go west." You chew slowly. You don't ask where west leads. You're not sure it matters anymore. Every direction feels like escape and danger braided together. He explains that a woman near Tours takes in girls sometimes. No questions, no names, just a warm place to hide and enough coin to keep quiet. He's delivered 3 there so far. 1 made it to Spain. 1 found work in a tailoring house. 1 married a baker and vanished completely. You listen. Then you say, "I don't want to vanish." Luke blinks. "I don't want to be safe and silent. I want them to remember me. I want them to choke on it." For the first time, he smiles. Not pity, not politeness, agreement. Then we'll go a different way. You set out again, this time cutting across farmlands where the grass is tall and yellowed by the season. You keep to the edges, near hedges and tree lines, out of sight. In towns, you pass as siblings, dirty, poor, invisible. Luke talks to villagers for food, lies about dead parents and long walks, and you keep your head down, folding into yourself like it's an old habit. It is. One night, 2 weeks into the journey, you find a house in the woods. Not an ordinary house. A stone cottage, square and sharp, its roof covered in moss, its windows covered from the inside. A chimney, but no smoke. A door, but no trail. Luke hesitates. "I've heard of this place," he says. "It's not on maps." You ask what it is. He says nothing. You knock. A woman opens the door. She's tall, barefoot, hair in long gray braids. Her eyes are sharp enough to cut through lies. She looks you both over once, then steps aside. Inside, the air smells like dried herbs, ink, and something older, something like parchment soaked in wax and time. There are shelves upon shelves of books, no labels, no dust. You sit by the fire while she makes tea. She doesn't ask your name. Instead, she brings you a box. Inside are letters, dozens of them, some stained, some burned, some with royal seals cracked open, all written by girls. You pick one up at random. "They said I would wear silk. I do. It's tied around my mouth." Another, "He promised I'd be remembered. I wasn't. I'm writing this so I can remember myself." You look up at the woman. She finally speaks. "Every girl who's come through here left a story." You ask why. because forgetting is what they want, she says. And memory is a kind of rebellion. Luke stirs beside you, quiet, reverent. The woman, who still hasn't offered a name, unrolls a map across the table. It's old, hand-drawn, marks carved into the edges, tiny symbols along the borders, not territories, roots. She's building something, Luke says, almost to himself. The woman corrects him. We are. You spend the night there, not just sleeping, but writing. She gives you ink, quills, parchment that smells like dried violets. You write your name, the real one, the first time in weeks. Then you write your story, not the whole of it, not yet, but enough. Enough to take up space, enough to wound, enough to count. The woman collects it when you're done, folds it, and tucks it into a wooden drawer among dozens of others. You ask if anyone reads them. Not yet, she says. You frown. Then what's the point? She smiles. Some stories are weapons, but others are seeds. The historical fact? In the late 18th century, clusters of orphan libraries appeared in the margins of France and Italy, collections of anonymous letters, confessions, and testimonies, often kept by women and passed along secretly. Many were destroyed. A few survived, hidden in monasteries or built into walls. The stories inside were raw, personal, and impossible to trace, by design. Fringe fact? A British collector in the 1800s claimed to have found one such cache inside a hollow statue of the Virgin Mary, buried in a burned abbey. Among the papers was a coded guide to safe houses across France, disguised as a rosary prayer book. It was never confirmed. But the pages went missing from the archive 2 years later. The scholarly debate? Whether these letters of the vanished were real or invented by reformists to shame monarchies and support revolutionary sentiment. Some argue the letters are fiction. Others say fiction was the only way truth could survive. You sleep in the loft above the woman's library that night. The floorboards creak. The wind howls outside. Luke sleeps across from you, curled into his coat. You stare at the ceiling and wonder if Sabine would have written something too. You imagine her words, clean and biting, carved into paper like glass. You wish you had them beside you. In the morning, the woman is gone. No sign of her, no note, just a stack of blank parchment on the table. Luke shrugs. She does that, he says. She'll be back. You step outside. The forest stretches in every direction. The world feels no safer, but now, at least, you know it remembers. You carry that with you, and the ribbon, and the name you wrote down in ink. Your real one. For now, that's enough. The next village is small enough to have no name, just a handful of buildings huddled together like secrets around a well. It smells of wood smoke and wet animals. The sky above it is bruised with clouds, and the fields surrounding it are thick with wheat, the kind of gold that looks beautiful until you realize how easy it is to disappear inside. You and Luke arrive just after dusk, cloaked in the anonymity of road dust and worn boots. You haven't spoken much since the library in the woods. Not because there's tension. If anything, it's the opposite. You're comfortable in your silence now. Not every scar needs a voice. Some just need company. The tavern keeper rents you a small room with a slanted roof and a cracked window. The mattress is lumpy, the blanket smells like a stranger's breath, and there's a dried flower tucked into the crevice of the windowsill. You lie down and dream not of the palace, but of the convent and the mirror chair, and then a garden you don't recognize, full of white foxes with women's eyes. When you wake, your mouth tastes like blood. Luke has already left to find work, something temporary, moving crates or sweeping stables. You stay behind and wander the village, careful not to look too curious. You pass an apothecary, a tailor, a chapel so small it looks like it could blow over in a strong wind. Outside the chapel stands a statue, weather-worn and half-covered in moss. A woman, kneeling, her hands bound in front of her. No plaque, no name, but something in the tilt of her chin makes your throat go tight. You leave the square and follow the path behind the chapel, winding up a small hill. At the top sits the cemetery. There's nothing remarkable about it at first. Just crooked gravestones, most leaning like drunkards, others broken entirely. But then, near the back, something catches your eye. A stone marker, flat and low, half buried under ivy. Someone has scratched a name into it, not carved, scratched. Sabine. You fall to your knees. It can't be her. Not this far from Versailles. Not this soon. The date is recent. Days ago. Your brain rejects it. Your body doesn't. Your body curls forward until your forehead touches the stone, and for a while, you just stay there. Breathing, shaking. You hear footsteps. Luke stands a few feet behind, hands in his coat. He doesn't ask how you found it. He doesn't say a word. Just kneels beside you. You tell him everything. How she stayed so you could leave. How she knew the cost and chose it anyway. How her voice never wavered, not even once. Luke listens the way no one else ever has, and when you're done, he reaches into his satchel and pulls out a small folded scrap of paper. I was going to wait, he says, but maybe now's the time. He hands it to you. It's a letter, unsealed. The handwriting is unmistakable. Sabine, if you're reading this, then I'm not where I was. Maybe I'm gone. Maybe I've become something else. Don't mourn me. Remember me, and don't stop walking. We started something. You'll finish it. Burn what needs burning. Save what you can. And if you ever get a chance to spit in a duke's wine, make it count. You laugh, then sob, then laugh again. The historical fact? Letters from women marked as runaways or fallen were rarely preserved. But in the 19th century, a collection surfaced in a manor house attic in Brittany. Letters written from one woman to another, signed only with initials. Many of them reference an unnamed girl who lit the match. Some historians believe it was a real person. Others say it was metaphor. Fringe fact? One of those letters was reportedly found sewn into the lining of a traveling cloak, folded around a bone charm meant for protection. The cloak was traced to a known palace attendant, who vanished after a scandal involving the king's valet. The charm is now missing. The letter's ink had to be reconstructed using ash. The scholarly debate? Whether legacy can survive when history refuses to write it down. Whether women like Sabine were erased because they were inconvenient, or because they were dangerous in the way truth is dangerous. Quiet, persistent, impossible to kill completely. That night, you and Luke sit in the tavern's back room, huddled near the fireplace. We need to do something, you say. Luke nods. There's a town not far from here, he says. Big enough to have gossip, small enough to listen. They say there's a printer there. Used to work for the court. Got thrown out for spreading unpatriotic literature. He still prints underground. You lean forward. Can he do stories? Luke smiles. He can do anything. You go the next morning, riding in the back of a fish cart, hiding beneath a tarp that smells like salt and old regret. The printer lives above a bakery. He's wiry, covered in ink, with eyes like cracked glass and a laugh that doesn't reach his mouth. But he listens. And when you show him your pages, your words, your ink-stained story, he nods. I'll need paper, he says, and time. You ask how many he can make. As many as you want, he says, but they'll be read at a cost. You know the cost? You accept it. The first batch prints a week later. Thin, smuggled pages, stories disguised as parables, girls with names like symbols, queens who wear no crowns, mirror chairs described as fairy tale thrones. Enough fiction to protect you, enough truth to cut deep. You send them out, tied to pigeons, folded in loaves of bread, slipped under tavern doors, buried in crates of apples bound for court kitchens, carried by men like Luke, left in the corners of convents, hidden in the hems of dresses, and always, on the back page, one line. We remember. The next month, a girl writes back, then another, then a dozen. They use names like yours, like Sabine's, like no one's. They tell you about the secret halls, the new chairs, the tunnels that haven't collapsed. You write it all down and send it back out. The network builds slowly, quietly, like roots. You're not vanishing anymore. You're growing. And one day soon, When the palace cracks open just enough, the stories will pour in like light through broken, stained glass. And they won't be able to look away. The stories keep coming. They arrive in scraps, sometimes folded into the lining of jackets, sometimes scrawled on the back of church donation notes, sometimes burned at the edges to make them look like prayers offered too close to the flame. You read them all, every single one, the ones written with trembling hands and the ones penned with anger so sharp it slants the ink, the ones that say too much and the ones that say too little, as if their writers were still afraid the paper would report them. They come from convents, from workhouses, from girls trapped in marriages to men 3 times their age, and from girls who only ever made it as far as the garden wall. One comes from inside the palace itself, unsigned of course, but unmistakably real. They've renamed the mirror room. Now they call it the Salon de Clarté. They say it's for reflection. But the mirrors haven't changed, just the excuses. You sit with Luke at the back of the print shop, the pages spread across the table like cards in a fortune-telling game. He reads silently, jaw tight, hands still. You both know what you're doing is more than printing now. It's documenting. It's archiving what the world has spent centuries trying to erase. The printer, a man named Marcel, starts binding the pages together into small, stitched booklets. He doesn't ask questions, doesn't make comments. But you've seen him hold one too long sometimes, staring at a particular passage, like a wound he didn't know he had just reopened. You title the first collection, Petals Under Marble. No one knows what it means but the girls who need to. Distribution grows more complex. You form codes, color-coded ribbons, placement tricks. One under a windowsill means safe to talk. A chalk mark on a door means danger, move on. You keep your face turned down in public, but your words are now everywhere, in taverns, in bakeries, in a basket at a market stall labeled needlework patterns. It takes time, but it's working. You hear whispers of a lady in waiting who refused to bow and was quietly exiled instead of punished. Of a duchess who stepped between a visiting noble and a girl who couldn't speak for herself. Of a girl named Maëlle who was scheduled for rotation and disappeared before her name was called. They're not victories yet, but they're shifts. Luke starts calling the movement the root work. You like it. It's not a rebellion, not a revolt. It's quieter, slower, but deeper. Something pulling loose the foundation stone by stone. One night, Marcel brings you a new letter. No envelope, no seal, just your name on the outside. Real name. Only one person still uses it. You unfold it carefully and I'm still alive. The queen knows I helped you, but she's not as loyal as they think. She's not as safe either. She played the game too long and now it's playing her. They'll use her until she's inconvenient. Then they'll send her off in pearls and poison. The others suspect. Gabrielle most of all. She walks the halls like a ghost with a grudge, and the star is gone from her file. You were right to leave, but be careful. There's talk of hunting dogs, not the literal kind, the court kind. Men who were trained to sniff out shame and call it duty. One of them is asking questions in the countryside, about a girl with quiet eyes and ink-stained hands. Hide if you have to, but don't stop. What you're doing matters. There's no signature, but you know who wrote it. Sabine. You read the letter 5 times, then burn it. Not because you want to forget, but because you know someone would kill to remember it. You start traveling again, not far, not openly, but enough to meet new girls, to pass codes, to deliver books. You no longer dress like a servant. You've created something new, a look that doesn't belong to any one class. You blend in everywhere and belong nowhere. Luke travels with you when he can, though sometimes you go separately. He's training others now, boys and girls both, teaching them how to pass notes, how to ask for help without speaking, how to carry grief without letting it drag you under. You stay in a farmhouse one week, a convent the next, a shipyard follows, then a theater. In Bordeaux, you meet a seamstress who once made dresses for the Queen's cousin. She sews messages into bodice linings now. In Marseille, a fisherman's daughter hides your pamphlets in barrels of salt meant for Versailles kitchens. And in Lyon, you meet a girl who isn't a girl anymore. She's a mother. She tells you, holding her baby, "I didn't get out in time, but she will." That night, you write a new letter, not to any one girl, To all of them. You were not weak. You were not foolish. You were not ruined. You were placed inside a machine designed to take what it wanted and leave the rest for ash. You lived. You are still living. And that is the defiance they never counted on. The historical fact? Pamphlets distributed in secrecy across Europe during times of upheaval, French Revolution, Restoration, even during Napoleon's exile, were often written by anonymous hands. Many were destroyed, but the ones that survived shaped entire waves of reform. Their authors? Mostly unnamed. Their impact? Immeasurable. Fringe fact? A single pamphlet found in a hidden drawer of a demolished French abbey was titled, "Let the Girls Speak." Only one copy exists. The handwriting matches no known figures, but the ink contains traces of rose oil and soot, the same recipe used in convents to write messages invisible until heeded. The scholarly debate, whether these works were real resistance or symbolic gestures, but the answer is obvious to you now. Resistance isn't always fire. Sometimes it's ink. Sometimes it's a name scrawled into stone behind a chapel. Sometimes it's a body that keeps walking, even when no one expects it to. You return to the village where you found Sabine's grave. You place a new stone beside hers. It's blank. Not because you don't know what to say, but because it belongs to someone who hasn't made it out yet. When they do, they'll write their name on it, and remember that someone was waiting. You don't remember exactly when it starts to shift, when the movement you've nurtured in scraps and secrets stops being just a whisper between frightened girls and begins to spread like smoke through the corridors of power. All you know is one morning in spring, you wake to find a courier waiting outside the safe house near Rouen, holding a satchel that smells like perfume and fear, and inside it is a letter that changes everything. Not from a girl this time, from a duchess. I once thought I was above it all, that station protected me, that pearls could be armor, but I've come to see I was only ever polished for display, the same as they were. The difference is, I learned to walk away while I still remembered how. She encloses a list, names, places, rotations scheduled, upcoming selections. You and Luke pore over it in stunned silence. The names aren't just girls now, they're men, lords, priests, judges, names with weight, targets. It's the first crack in the upper wall. And once that crack appears, others follow. A lady-in-waiting in Lila who steals keys and copies guest rosters. A former court musician who whispers to pages about which nobles drink too much and forget to pull the curtains. A governess in Vienna who stitches warnings into her students' embroidery lessons. You begin writing less and planning more. Luke calls it coordination. You call it readiness. Girls are no longer just hiding. They're signaling, leaving behind decoys, sending false letters to the palace so others have time to run. Some have even started pushing back, quietly, subtly. A ruined petticoat here, a spilled wine cup there, a lie whispered into the right ear at the wrong time. You get word that the mirror chair has been removed. Not destroyed, just relocated to where no one knows. But the girls say the room is empty now. Cold, like it's holding its breath. One of your couriers tells you a girl was meant to be presented last week, but the Count fell ill. Rumors say he was poisoned. Someone slipped laudanum into his tea, and when he woke, the girl was gone. They've searched every guest wing. No trace. You smile for the first time in days. Then one night you receive a visitor. Not Luke. Not a girl. A man. Older. Gray at the temples. Dressed like a diplomat, but too still, too careful. He says, "We need to talk." You don't let him in. You meet him in the alley behind the shop with your knife pressed against your thigh and 3 exits mapped in your mind. He introduces himself with a name you don't recognize, but then he says a title, the kind you do, Chamberlain of Records, which means, essentially, the keeper of the paper trail, the man who files the official story of the monarchy. You ask him what he wants. He says, to correct the archive. You laugh. He doesn't. He says, "I've seen what you're doing, and I believe it's only a matter of time before something collapses. If it does, I want to be on the right side of the page." You watch him closely. You think history will remember us? He answers without hesitation, "If I do my job right." You don't trust him, but you don't stop him. He leaves behind a book, leather-bound, too fine for the movement. Inside it are redacted reports, rewritten testimonies, falsified birth records. Evidence that the palace has erased hundreds of names, girls mostly, over the last 2 decades. Buried under the phrase, domestic reassignment. You flip through it, your throat tightening with every page. Names you recognize. Faces you saw once, briefly, in the halls of the palace. Gone. Except now, not now they're in your archive. You add the names to the next volume of Petals Under Marble. You send a copy to the convent at St. Croix, where Elodie still lives, now teaching girls how to read, how to write, how to hide paper in the soles of shoes. She writes back, furious and trembling. I knew it. I knew I wasn't the only one. I just didn't know how far it went, or how deep. She's started organizing her own branch now. She calls it the Quiet Bell. You approve. In Paris, a noblewoman is caught with one of your volumes in her private collection. They call it treasonous. They burn her books and lock her in a tower, but by the next week, 3 more girls arrive in Lyon carrying hand-copied versions of the same text. The story refuses to die. You begin inserting small notes into the margins. Tiny, personal things. Sabine once told me you can tell who's in power by who controls the silence. If you're reading this, you survived, or you're about to. Write it down, even if you burn it after. And always, at the end. We remember, you're in a different city every week now, always moving, always watching. Sometimes you sleep beside Luke in barns, shoulders touching, warm in the way people get when they've shared more than just stories. Sometimes you sleep alone, and the ghosts come louder. You start to think about the queen more often, not with hatred, with curiosity. What did she see? What did she choose not to? Did she ever want to run? Did she ever try? Or did she lace herself into her own kind of mirror chair and call it destiny? The historical fact? Several noblewomen of the Ancien Regime were later revealed, posthumously, to have funded or assisted in underground movements, often secretly protecting the very girls their husbands and sons endangered. One even left her entire estate to an unnamed Society of Women. Fringe fact? One confiscated diary from a queen's personal maid mentions a lady with a glass ring who would place it on a map to show girls the safest roads. The maid claimed it glowed when a girl was in danger. Scholars debate whether the ring existed or was metaphor for watching over others in silence. The scholarly debate? Whether the upper classes truly changed or simply adapted. Were the Allies real or convenient? Did they act from conscience or calculation? And does it matter if girls like you are finally being seen? You fall asleep in a field outside Toulouse one night, the stars wide above you, and for the first time in a long time, you don't dream of palaces. You dream of roots, of marble cracking, of girls walking out of shadows, not into them. When you wake, there's a folded piece of paper beside you, Luke's handwriting. One of the hunting dogs is dead. Poisoned wine. They think it was a mistake. I think you're getting closer. The closer you get to the palace, the quieter the world becomes. Not with silence, but with tension. The kind of stillness that hums beneath the skin like a held breath. Towns grow larger, but doors stay shut longer. There are more guards on the roads now, dressed not in polished uniforms, but in quiet, nondescript clothes. The kind that make you think they're just another traveler until you catch the glint of steel or the sudden stiff angle of posture. The palace knows. Of course it knows. You've left a trail of ink and whisper and resistance that no amount of noble blindness can ignore. And now, they're trying to drag it back into the dark. But you've already learned, there are no shadows deep enough to hide the truth once it's learned to breathe. Luke doesn't try to stop you when you say it out loud, sitting by a cracked fountain in a village just 20 miles from Versailles. I have to go back. He only nods, slow and heavy. Then we do it carefully. You shake your head. No, we do it right. The plan isn't complicated, that's the point. Complex things break under pressure. But this, it's simple, clean, precise. You'll enter the city as a laundress. An official rotation is already scheduled to bring in fresh linens to the palace's west wing, and one of your contacts has secured a place for you on the cart. You'll wear gray. You'll carry nothing but a basket and your story, stitched into the hem of your underskirt, in case everything else is taken. You'll find the queen, or what's left of her, and you'll give her a choice. Not a threat, not a plea, a choice. Luke insists on trailing you from a distance. He refuses to let you vanish inside alone without someone watching for the moment when everything goes wrong. You want to argue, but you know he's right. At dawn, the gates rise before you like a memory you never quite wanted to recall. Versailles, still bloated and beautiful, still polished to distraction, still rotting at its center. You walk through the gates with your head bowed and your fingers trembling under the weight of the basket. The guards don't look twice. Why would they? You're exactly what you're supposed to be, another girl with soft hands and softer speech, here to wash away the sins of silk. Inside, the halls haven't changed. The rugs still muffle every step. The mirrors still reflect what you aren't. The portraits on the walls still stare down with eyes that never blink. You're taken to the laundry chamber first, deep below the guest wing. It smells like damp linen, soap, and the kind of sweat no one admits to. You scrub, you fold, you wait. Hours pass. Then, at the right moment, you move. You ask to deliver fresh linens to the queen's private chambers. No one stops you. Why would they? They still think girls don't matter until they become a problem. You take the corridor slowly, counting the turns like beads on a rosary. The halls narrow, the guards thin. The sounds grow fainter. You reach the antechamber. A woman stands outside, older than you, thinner than the air around her, draped in blue. She sees you and frowns. You're not her usual girl. You nod. She asked for someone new. The woman stares a beat too long, then waves you in. The queen's chambers are dim, heavier than you remember. The curtains are drawn, the fireplace unlit. She sits near the window, her back to you, staring at the garden. Her hair is silver now, her posture perfect, her stillness complete. "Leave it on the chaise," she says. You don't. You step forward. "I thought I'd never see this place again." Her shoulders stiffen, but she doesn't turn. "You should have stayed gone," she says. "I couldn't." Finally, she turns. Her face is older, sharper, but the eyes are the same, calculating, wary, tired. "You're braver than I thought," she says, "or more foolish." You shrug. "Aren't they the same thing in palaces?" She almost smiles. Then you say, "You have a choice." She laughs once, dry, humorless. "You're giving me a choice?" You nod. "I'm not asking you to confess. I'm not here to tear down your throne. I'm here to ask if you're ready to stop pretending." She says nothing. You reach into your bodice and pull out the folded volume of Petals Under Marble. Not the newest edition, not the prettiest. Just one copy. You place it on her desk. She looks at it like it might burn her. "I know you've read them," you say. "Somewhere. I know you felt them rising under the walls." Still, she says nothing. So you keep going. You can keep hiding. You can let the dogs sniff out the girls until we're all gone. Or you can open the door. She lifts her gaze. "To what?" "To the truth," you say. "And the reckoning that's already on its way." The historical fact? In the final years of the French monarchy, before the revolution erupted, there were records of internal divisions within the court itself. Letters from anonymous nobles urged moderation, reform, and even surrender of power, not out of kindness, but survival. Some were ignored, others vanished. Fringe fact? One rumor claimed Marie Antoinette kept a secret book of letters written by the girls in her household. That she read them every night. That she wept. That when the revolution came, she burned them all. Others say she hid them in a music box that was never found. The scholarly debate? Was any queen ever truly a woman with power, or was she simply the most beautifully decorated prisoner? Were they architects of cruelty, or its gilded victims? And if they were both, who gets to decide which mattered more? The queen looks at you for a long time. Then she opens the book, just once. Just enough to see the first page. We remember. Her fingers tremble. She closes it again. Then she says softly, "I'll need time." You nod. Not too much. Time has teeth now. You leave without being stopped. Back through the halls, past the mirrors, through the gates. Luke is waiting in the orchard, half shrouded in the mist. You walk past him like a stranger. He follows. Neither of you speak. Not until the palace is gone behind you. Not until you're back on the road. Only then do you say, "She didn't say no." Luke exhales, slow and heavy. Then maybe she's more like you than we thought. You don't answer, but you hope. Because maybe if a queen can break the pattern, even once, the whole thing can unravel. And maybe the girls won't have to keep running. Maybe they'll start walking back in, with fire in their mouths and stories in their hands. The message spreads before you do. That's how you know something's changing, not just in corners and shadows, but in the very corridors you once tiptoed through with your head down and your heart thudding like a captive bird. In every town you pass through now, someone has heard the name Petals Under Marble. They whisper it like a psalm, or a promise, or maybe just a dare. At the edge of a village near Orleans, a butcher's daughter presses a folded scrap of linen into your hand, eyes darting. On it, stitched in pale blue thread, "We remember." You don't ask her name. You just nod and keep walking. Luke meets you 2 towns later, breathless from running, a smear of soot on his cheek, a new pouch of papers tucked beneath his coat. "They're starting to fight back," he says. "The court sent a decree. Any printed material with your markings is to be confiscated and destroyed. There's talk of trials, of cleansing." You sit in the shade of a crumbling church wall and read the latest volume, smuggled back from Paris. It's one of yours, but edited by someone else. A girl who must have been trained in more than embroidery. She's written footnotes, references, cross-checked names, a scholar of the untold. You trace her words with your fingers. Luke leans back against the wall. They're scared. You know that, right? You do. You see it in the desperate moves, in the way nobles are quietly fleeing their country estates, in the sudden rise of unsanctioned confessions appearing in popular salons. But fear makes people dangerous. You've learned that more than once. So you prepare, you split up the routes, you pass on your methods, you make sure that if someone follows you too closely, the whole thing won't shatter. It'll just branch again. You meet with Elodie, now traveling under the name Sister Marie Soleil. She's rougher than you remember, harder. But her eyes still burn the same. She brings news. The Queen hasn't spoken publicly in weeks. No court appearances, no tours, but her ladies are reading. All of them, you ask? Elodie smirks. Enough. The Queen hasn't exposed you. Not yet. And maybe that's its own kind of answer. A carriage driver passes along word from a duchess who's begun hosting supper salons in the countryside. Less about food, more about information. The first thing served is always a folded napkin. Inside, a name, a date, and a question. Did you see her? One woman reportedly answered, "No, but I read her, and I'd follow ink like that into fire." You never thought you'd have followers. You never wanted them. But it's not about you now. It's about girls like Noelle, who wrote that she was 14 when she realized her body would never belong to her again. About girls like Sarah, who jumped from a second-story window in her nightdress and crawled through bramble thorns to get away. About girls like Claire, who disappeared without a word, and who maybe, just maybe, might still be reading from somewhere. One night, in an inn outside of Chartres, you find a mirror, a full-length one, with a gilded frame too rich for the room it's in. You almost walk past it. But something makes you stop. You look at yourself, and you don't flinch, not anymore. You look older, sharper, but your eyes are clear, your mouth is steady. You reach into your coat and pull out the latest edition of your volume and hold it beside your reflection, as if to say, "This is me now. This too belongs to me." You're still looking when a girl enters the room behind you, thin, pale, hair scraped back like a servant, but eyes that know things. "I know you," she says softly. You turn. Don't deny it. She steps closer, pulls a tiny folded square from her pocket, unfolds it. It's a page from one of your earliest prints, smudged, water-stained, but intact. They wanted silence. I gave them echo. You don't remember writing that. She does. I read this the night before they tried to rotate me, she says. I put it in my shoe. I ran. You ask her name. Victoire, she says, but only here. They don't get my real one. You smile. Good. She sits beside you, just like that. And you talk until morning. The historical fact? Underground literary networks surged during times of political unrest, particularly during the French Revolution. Pamphlets, journals, even plays circulated among people who could barely read, memorized, shared, recited. The movement of the written word often moved faster than armies. Fringe fact? A coded poem found etched into the underside of a prison bedpost in Versailles included the phrase, "echoes of petals," a suspected reference to your work, though the timeline is debated. Some believe the poem was a forgery. Others say it's the only surviving message from a girl who died unnamed. The scholarly debate? Whether acts of literary resistance mattered more than physical ones. Whether a movement of ink and voice could truly shift the trajectory of a kingdom. But those who doubt it never had to write just to prove they existed. In the coming weeks, you hear of new things. A page boy arrested for carrying a hidden list of names in his boot. A noblewoman exiled for unpatriotic sympathies, though she never spoke a word aloud. A convent burned, but its girls already scattered, safe. Someone, no one knows who, carved WEREMEMBER into the steps of the Royal Opera House. It's painted over the next day, but by morning someone else has carved it again, this time deeper. Luke returns from a trip south with a map covered in dots. He's coordinated new cells. Girls are teaching other girls. Boys are asking questions. Even servants are beginning to act like their silence isn't mandatory. You've started something, he says. You shake your head. We did. He kisses you then, quick, certain. You don't pull away. You don't have time for dreams, not really, but for once, this one feels earned. The next night, the First Royal Council meets to discuss what they're calling the Ink Rebellion. They don't understand it yet. They still think you're one girl with a press and too much courage. They don't know you've become hundreds, thousands. They don't know how many voices now carry your rhythm, or how many girls look at mirrors and see themselves as more than prey. They don't know what's coming, but you do, and you're not stopping. Not until every girl has a voice that can shake stone. You learn to disappear in daylight. By now, your face is almost folklore, half myth, half wanted poster, depending on who's telling the story. So you become other things, a woman with a limp, a merchant's widow, a midwife with a bag of herbs and a tongue too blunt for polite company. You wear soot on your cheeks, let your hair fall into tangles, wrap your wrists in cloth. You speak in accents that make your own name feel foreign. You do this because the girls still need you, because the palace is watching more closely now and the dogs have grown smarter. Luke calls it turning shadow. You call it strategy. You stop staying anywhere longer than a few nights. You write by candlelight and pass your pages to new runners, boys too small to be questioned, old women who look like no one's idea of a threat. You've built a web of watchers and whisperers so delicate it shouldn't hold. And yet, it does. Then one night, near the border of Burgundy, you find something you weren't supposed to. A house. At first, it looks like nothing. Plain shutters, pale stone, a roof that's slightly caved on one side. But there's something wrong with the silence. It's too tight, too rehearsed. You knock anyway, because you've learned that answers sometimes come wrapped in accidents. The woman who opens the door is no servant. She's dressed in linen, but her hands are too soft. Her eyes are too quick. You say the phrase, "The storm is colder than the wall." It's a test. She doesn't blink. But both can be crossed. You step inside. The house is a shell. No furniture, no fire. But beneath the rug in the back room is a trapdoor. And beneath that, a spiral staircase carved into stone. You descend and find the anatomical cabinet. That's what they call it. Or at least what the ledgers call it, buried in obscure expense reports filed under court-endorsed instruction. You'd heard rumors. You didn't believe them. Now you do. It's not a room. It's a vault, cold and clean, lined with rows of drawers like an apothecary's lab, only wider, deeper. Each drawer bears a number, no names, but inside, bodies, not entire, not always, limbs, organs, preserved under wax or oil, some labeled, others not. Your stomach flips. You grip the edge of the nearest table to steady yourself. The woman who led you here, Madame Coulon, she says her name is, walks calmly through the rows. Most of these were never meant to be seen, she says. Girls who bled wrong, who bore wrong, who died wrong. You can barely speak. Why are they here? To understand them, she replies, so the palace could avoid imperfection in its selections. You stare at her. They studied the girls? She nods. They called it refinement. You want to scream. Instead, you step to a drawer and open it. Inside is a rib cage, too small for a grown woman. The label reads, Subject 19D, rotational failure. You can't breathe. Madame Coulon says softly, I didn't build this. I inherited it, and I've kept it hidden. Because if we destroy it, we forget. But if we show it, she trails off. You say, they'll call us liars. Yes, but not forever. Because now you have proof. You stay the night in the vault, unable to sleep. You pace. You read the records. Some are scientific, cold. Others are full of horror disguised as curiosity. You find notes about sterilizations, about injections, about trial drugs, girls used as testing ground. You knew it was bad. You didn't know it was this. Luke arrives the next day. You don't speak. You just open drawer 34B. He looks. His jaw locks. Then he says, we're going to publish it. You hesitate. They'll say we forged it. Then we show them too much to deny. The next volume of Petals Under Marble becomes the most dangerous yet. Not because of what it says, but because of what it shows. Drawings, transcripts, photographs smuggled from a court physician's journal. You call the volume the Unseen Archive. You send it to convents, to universities, to royal physicians too old to be loyal anymore. You send it to the palace. You wait. 3 weeks later, a headline appears in a radical paper out of Lyon, Where the Daughters Went, Inside the Royal Cabinet of Blood. It explodes. Public fury like you've never seen. Even those who called you liars before can't ignore this. Protests follow. Not riots, not yet, but pressure, tension. The Queen makes a statement, carefully crafted, thick with avoidance. The King says nothing at all. But the girls, they speak, they scream. Girls in salons, in court, in brothels, in churches. Girls from every class. They're done being quiet. They're done being cabinet material. You meet with Madame Coulon again. She tells you she's been threatened. You nod. I'm sorry. She shrugs. I chose this. She gives you a new set of files, older, sealed, from a wing even deeper than the vault. You read them that night, and discover something you never expected. You were in them. Subject 62F. Considered unusually quiet, unusually observant, potential for upper-tier placement. They'd been tracking you from the start, even before Sabine, even before the mirror chair. You were never free, not truly, until now. The historical fact? Anatomical study of women during the Enlightenment was often veiled in false scientific purpose. Some noble courts sanctioned the preservation of female bodies for medical display, though records were usually destroyed or buried to avoid scandal. Fringe fact. One account from a revolutionary medic described finding a chamber beneath a royal hospital filled with drawers marked only with letters and numbers. The medic claimed each drawer contained a fragment of a life erased. The account was dismissed as metaphor, until similar markings appeared in uncovered Versailles blueprints. The scholarly debate, whether exposing atrocities through documentation leads to real change or just temporary outrage. Whether justice can be built from the bones of the wronged. But you know this much. Secrets rot faster in daylight. You return to the field where you first met Luke. The night is warm. The sky is open. You say, they cataloged us. He answers, now we catalog them. You hold hands, not for comfort, for readiness, because the world is shifting now, and you'll make sure it never shifts back. It doesn't take long for the fire to spread, not a literal fire, though, in time, that too will come, but the kind that starts in the blood and won't be ignored. The release of the unseen archive triggers something raw and irreversible. Girls who once whispered now speak in full voice. Women who once stayed silent in salons now bring pages to dinner tables, slide them into coat pockets, leave them folded between the pages of prayer books in church pews. They're not afraid anymore. Not of exile, not of disgrace, not of being labeled unfit, impure, unruly. They claim the unruly, and the palace, for all its grand walls and mirrored rooms, cannot hold back the flood. You're watching it happen from the edge, because that's where you've always lived. At the margins, among the messengers, the printers, the laundresses, and midwives who've carried your work like contraband through the guts of the kingdom. You don't go to the capital, not yet. You know it's too soon. And besides, there are more girls to protect. But something has changed. You can feel it. The air is electric, sharp around the edges. Like something is about to break. It's not fear, it's expectation. And then, one evening just after dusk, you receive word. A girl has been arrested. Her name is Odette. You've never met her, but you've read her. She's one of your writers, part of the Lion Network. Only 17, but sharp with language, brutal with truth. She published an essay called The Threshold Girl, about what it means to be both wanted and discarded at the same time, about how the palace trains girls to hold power in their mouths but never in their hands. The essay made it into the salons within a week, into Parliament within 2. She's being tried in Versailles, not in private. Publicly, they're making an example of her. Luke finds you sitting by the river the morning after the news arrives. You're holding a page. Odette wrote. A short poem, no title, no punctuation. My body is not apology, not offering, not soft, not yours, and never again mine. Without war. You hand it to Luke without speaking. He sits beside you, then says, we should go. You shake your head. It's a trap. He nods. Of course it is. Silence. Then, are we going anyway? You look up. Yes. So you ride, through narrow valleys and dust-choked villages. You switch carriages, change cloaks, trade names at least twice. You arrive in Versailles just as the city is beginning to fill with a crowd that can no longer be ignored. They've gathered for the trial, but they've stayed for something else. Hope? Maybe. You press through the mass of bodies. You can feel it in the way they move. There's no fear here, no shame, just fire. And at the center, in the cathedral square, is a raised platform with a chair. Not the mirror chair, but something like it. The message is clear. Odette is brought out in chains. Her dress is torn. Her cheek is bruised. But her posture is perfect. And when they ask her name, she looks up and says, clear as a bell, I am all of them. The crowd doesn't erupt. It breathes, like one giant body exhaling after centuries of holding its breath. The trial is a joke. Of course it is. A parade of false witnesses and rusted moral outrage. They call her indecent, treasonous, dangerous. But it's the last charge that lands hardest. They call her disobedient. And you realize that's what they fear most. Not rebellion, not seduction, disobedience. Because disobedience refuses to entertain the illusion that power is natural. It refuses the crown. It laughs at the throne. You can't sit quietly. So you climb onto a crate at the edge of the square. You pull out one of your pages, and you read. It's not a speech. It's not even new. It's the very first page of Petals Under Marble, the one Sabine helped write. They taught us to kneel. We learned to rise. They taught us to hush. We taught each other to scream. They took our bodies. They never took our names. They just buried them. We are digging now. Someone else climbs up beside you, then another, and another. It becomes a chorus, not organized, not perfect, but powerful. Odette is still in the chair, but now she's smiling. And then something strange happens. The judge flees. No fanfare, no outburst, just leaves the platform. The guards follow. No one dares take his place. For the first time in palace history, the trial stops. Not adjourned, not postponed. Evaporates. Odette is unchained by a woman in the crowd, a nun. You'll ask her name later. You'll never forget it. She says, "I was waiting for this." Odette steps down, and the crowd parts to let her walk. Not escape. Walk. The historical fact? There are records of a trial in late 1787 that ended abruptly after mass unrest in the square outside. The court claimed weather as the cause, but private letters suggest the accused, a servant girl named O, was released under pressure from the crowd after it became clear that proceeding would risk revolt. Fringe fact? A single page remains from that trial, unsigned and badly burned. The handwriting matches no known officials. But scrawled in the margins are the words, "We are not a whisper anymore." The scholarly debate? Whether that trial was the spark of something greater or a fluke. Whether girls like Odette and Sabine were anomalies or architects. But standing in the square, in the echo of the girl's voice, you know the truth. This wasn't a moment, it was a signal. You stay in Versailles that night. You and Luke hide in the bell tower of a gutted chapel. You watch the streets. You hear singing, and for the first time, no one's hiding it. You rest your head on his shoulder and you whisper, "We're almost there." And for once, you believe it. The palace gates don't close anymore. Not fully. You notice it 2 days after the trial, after Odette walked free and the judge vanished and the crowd didn't riot but simply refused to leave. The guards still stand there, stiff and expressionless, but they no longer check every cart. They don't stop every girl. Something has shifted in them too. Maybe they've seen enough. Maybe they're waiting for orders that won't come. Or maybe, like so many others, they're simply tired of pretending not to know. Inside, the air feels thinner, like the building itself is exhaling. You walk the gardens in silence, Luke beside you in the clothes of a courier, ink-stained, dusted with road salt, a smuggler's heart beating under a nobleman's coat. No one stops you, no one even looks twice. You go back, not to the Queen, not yet, but to the wing where the girls once waited. The rooms are smaller than you remember. The velvet curtains now look dull, the mirrors dusty. A few are cracked. One is missing entirely, as if someone yanked it from the wall in haste. You step into the room you once shared with Sabine, and for a moment it feels like stepping into a memory that finally stopped lying. You sit on the edge of the bed, the same one where she handed you the first smuggled page, the one that read simply, "Not all cages are locked." You run your fingers along the seam of the mattress, and you find it. The slit in the fabric, the hiding place. Still there, still waiting. Inside is the ribbon, the one you wore the night of your rotation, pale pink, slightly frayed, the bow still tied. You hold it carefully, gently, not as a relic, as a reminder, because the girls are coming back, not to serve, to witness. They arrive quietly at first, a girl with a tray of food who winks when she sets down the plate, a maid who hums a tune you published 2 winters ago, a seamstress who stitches the phrase, "We remember," into the hem of a duchess's gown. Then more. A courier brings word that convents across France have started formal instruction for girls, reading, writing, resistance. In one convent, they've built a stage and perform short plays based on your pamphlets. In another, the nuns pass out paper petals, each with a name of a girl who disappeared, who is no longer forgotten. In Paris, a theater posts a new playbill. Petals Under Marble, a story in whispers, now loud enough to hear. It sells out in a day. The Queen still hasn't spoken, but her portrait in the Grand Hall has been defaced. Someone took a brush to it, not to destroy her face, but to paint a ribbon across her eyes. Not a blindfold, a choice. You return to Madame Coulon's vault once more, and together you move the drawers. Not to hide them, to bury them. You mark the spot with a flat stone. No names, just a phrase. "We have learned enough from ghosts." And then you do something terrifying. You go back to her, the Queen. No disguise, no basket. Just your face, your voice, and the weight of what you've made. You're led in by the same pale woman as before, She watches you with a strange mix of suspicion and recognition, like you might be both traitor and savior in the same breath. You are. That's the point. The queen is not at the window this time. She's at the desk, writing. When she looks up, you see it. Not regret, not fear, awareness. She says, "They sent me reports. I thought they were exaggerating." You shrug. They always are, and never enough. She gestures for you to sit. You don't. Instead, you reach into your coat and pull out the last book, bound in rough leather, stained at the corners, pages written by dozens of hands, some shaky, some furious, some so beautiful they ache. You place it on her desk. "No more archives," you say. "No more cabinets, no more vaults." She opens it. She reads one passage aloud. It's from a girl named Therese. "They said I was ruined, but I am a ruin only because I survived the burning." She closes the book. Then, finally, she looks at you and says, "What do you want?" You hesitate. The answer is too big, too simple, so you give her only part of it. Names. She nods. "I can do that." You leave without bowing. You never will again. Outside, Luke waits with 2 horses. You mount in silence and ride into the edge of the afternoon. The air smells like loam, like rain waiting to fall. The historical fact? A small reform appeared in the records of 1788, a royal decree opening educational appointments to girls of common birth. Many historians dismissed it as political theater, but recent discoveries show an odd pattern. The appointments were all clustered around convents connected to the resistance. Fringe fact: a girl was said to have walked into Versailles carrying a book of confessions sewn into her skirt hem. She left without it, and days later, the Queen's handmaid was dismissed for reading aloud during quiet hours. No official charges filed. The scholarly debate, whether the monarchy adapted or only postponed its collapse, whether a few girls telling the truth was enough to unravel centuries of rot. But you know better. You were there. You're still there. You return to the village where Sabine's name is scratched into stone. You carve a second line beneath it. "And those who came after." You walk the edge of the field where girls once ran barefoot through dusk, and in your pocket is a list of names too long to finish, and yet never long enough. At night, you light a small candle. You place it in a window, and one by one, other windows light up. Dozens, hundreds, a silent signal. You're not alone. You were never alone. You step back and watch the glow spread across rooftops, like a secret that no longer wants to hide. You turn to Luke and say the last words Sabine ever wrote. "They'll remember us, or they'll answer to us." And finally, they will. So, here you are, at the end of the path, or at least this part of it. You've walked through corridors lined with velvet and poison, ducked beneath the weight of chandeliers that never saw you, stared down a crown that never once apologized. And you did it not as a girl waiting to be saved, but as the one who made a map for others to follow. You were not chosen. You chose, again and again, to run, to resist, to remember. And now the world is a little louder because of you. The palace may still stand. The portraits may still hang. The wine may still pour in crystal glasses. But behind the curtains, behind the curated smiles and perfumed lies, there's a tremble, a flicker, the kind that comes when something is no longer certain, when control slips just a little, because someone, many someones, have been writing, telling the truth, leaving no page unturned. And somewhere in a convent, a girl is reading your story. Somewhere in a village, a baker's daughter is tucking a note into the heel of a boot. Somewhere in the palace itself, a maid is folding a blanket over a duchess's lap and whispering a phrase you made famous. We remember. So do we. And even if the world forgets again, if they try to bury you under dust and marble and more polite versions of history, there will still be echoes, carried in ink, in scars, in silence broken on purpose. And if someday someone opens the wrong drawer in the right hallway and finds your name tucked into a seam, well, they'll know who you were, who you are, and they'll know they're not alone.